Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Market Open. We are live. It is Friday, February 20th. Folks, we have so much macroeconomic data that we are dealing with this morning. We got GDP for Q4. We got PCE. Those numbers just came out. We're going to talk about those numbers, see how the street is reacting to it. So far, the street's not the happiest. We are a bit red in the pre-market. We were green. Then the numbers came out, and now we're red. S&P 500 right there, down about 0.31%. On top of that, you've got a potential Supreme Court decision for tariffs coming up in about an hour. We don't know if we're actually going to get that decision, but if we do, it's going to be, well, I would say it would be market moving on this Friday as we end out the third week of February. But those are the three major things we have happening. Obviously, yesterday was one of the more flat to red Thursdays we've had over the past couple of weeks. It wasn't as red, like 2% down on the S&P that we've had over the past two Thursdays in a row, but it was indeed red. And so every time we've had that Friday, we get a little bit of a rebound. Today, we have some macro data that might stop that rebound based on how the market interprets it. But it would be nice to see if we can end green on today's Friday. So we got GDP, PCE, the VIX is already spiking. Let's get right into the data. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Good morning. Good morning. GDP, we missed by a lot. 1.4% versus 3% expected. Now, it's not the biggest deal in the world, given the market did expect that we were going to miss. Why did the market expect we were going to miss? Well, we had a government shutdown for 40 days, longest shutdown in history. And so, we were expected to miss on GDP. Your boy Trump already is commenting on GDP. He said the Democrat shutdown cost the USA at least 2 points in GDP. That's why they were doing it in mini form again. No shutdowns. Also, lower interest rates. Too late. Powell is the worst. So you got the GDP being affected by the shutdown, and Trump is making a point about why it's not really his fault. It's more about the shutdown. And then we had PCE, and the shutdown can be ignored. GDP growth can be ignored because at the end of the day, a lot of people thought it was priced in. But PCE was not as good as it needed to be. PCE came in at 2.9% versus 2.8% expected. That's hot. Core PCE 3% versus 2.9 expected. That's also hot. This is the highest PCE reading. Remember, PCE is the Fed's preferred measure of how they judge inflation, even more than CPI or PPI, since November 2023. And it's definitely not helping the probability for a rate cut. Rate cut odds are now at 6% for March. Unfortunately, this was not the best report that we needed to see. And as a result, that's why these numbers are a bit off in the morning. We've got a little bit of coverage on this, and then we will keep going from there.
Thank you, Rick. Steve Leisman can join us now and make sense of some of this. Steve, I figure if you get half of what the people were expecting for GDP, that the yields would go lower, but you got the inflation maybe being a little bit hotter, so it can't. They can't really go lower. What did the government shutdown? How much is that involved with that was during this period? And then didn't we had some trade deficit numbers that caused people like the Atlanta Fed to bring down GDP to what was that? Exports, but 1.4. If it was expected to be 2.8, how did it come in at 1.4?
Joe, this is great. You set me up perfectly for exactly what I was going to want to say. Two things about this number. The inflation numbers are bad. I'll get to that in a second. But the overall GDP number is not as bad as it looks, and was not actually as bad as expected, which could explain the market's kind of calm with this. Let me explain. As Joe just said, that trade deficit number came in yesterday, and it was worse than expected. We don't have that number when we estimate the fourth quarter GDP. Of course, all the timing on the data is all messed up. But anyway, that number came in, and on the street, what we call the tracking forecast, the forecast that plug in the numbers as they come into their estimate, they came down. I was thinking a number more like 2, but it came in quite a bit lower than that. I need to investigate why that is. But this precise answer to Joe's question is 1.15, or rather minus 1.15. That's what the federal government shut down, along with, by the way, the general decline in spending that is part of the administration's policy here on the federal side. But federal spending cost the GDP number 1.15 percentage points. So you can add that back, maybe, not all of it. The consumer was okay. The trouble here you're going to get to, Joe, and I think it's pretty clear, is the inflation numbers. You have two different sets of numbers, the CPI number and the PCE number. Won't go into all the details here. The PCE number that the Fed follows has less housing in it. So that positive data we got on the housing side, on the CPI number, not as important inside. Also, you have more healthcare inside the PCE number. Fed likes the PCE also because it shows substitution and it's a broader index. Anyway, that's what we got. That's their preferred indicator.
Look, the numbers aren't horrible. And as he was saying right there, shelter, which has been coming down decisively, and we've been tracking that for the past couple of weeks now, that is not included in PCE. So obviously that was not helping PCE take the bit of a hit that it took on CPI. Again, CPI came in at 2.4 versus 2.5. In general, like, it's a miss, but it's not like some catastrophic miss on both PCE and GDP. And again, GDP, it kind of was priced in because, you know, the market knew that because of that shutdown, we were probably going to have some problems. Remember, GDP before Q4 and Q3 was 4.4%. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that, you know, we were growing at 4.5% and now we're back down to 1.4%. The last time we had negative GDP growth was the start of 2025, and that was for some technicalities. But I doubt the trend will continue to be low GDP growth, especially with all the capex and investments, et cetera. But that shutdown definitely didn't help. So, I mean, yeah, it sounds bad. That's correct. It definitely sounds bad, but that's what we got. GDP at 1.4 versus 3 expected, and then PCE 2.9 versus 3 expected. And hopefully the market's going to be able to deal with that in an effective way. Yes, I'm drinking coffee, for those that are asking. I just found out about what instant coffee is. And quite frankly, I like it more than my apartment's coffee. Apparently, you can heat up your water and then just put the coffee in it and then mix it together, and then boom, you got a cup of coffee. I mean, this is French roast. I never finish the whole thing. I take like 3 sips throughout the morning, but like literally, so I don't even think I drink coffee. I just need something to like wake me up, I guess, but it's not even waking me up because I don't even drink it. So it saves me the trip going downstairs. Why are you guys saying that's disgusting? It's coffee. That's all it is. It's not that serious. We don't have to go through a Keurig. We don't have to grind the beans. Like, literally just throw it into the water. It's perfect. It looks amazing. Like, look at that. Looks like regular coffee. So yeah, I don't even, for those that are upset, I don't even drink it. Like, it's just something to get a little bit of juice in the morning. Why is everyone so mad? It's jail coffee. Instant coffee is disgusting. Okay, it's probably not as good as the one downstairs, but it's better than having to go downstairs, make the coffee, come back up. Like, I'm already late enough as it is. So usually I would do that at like 8:40, and then, you know, it ended up being late. So anyway, that's what we got. GDP growth and PCE. That's how it starts. I don't know if I could ever really be addicted to coffee. I never loved drinking it too much. All right, let's get into the actual headlines. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. First of all, let's talk about the biggest thing that happened from last night. This headline might have went under the radar for those that missed it. You probably like cafeteria food as well. That's crazy. That is crazy. Instant coffee is not cafeteria food, okay? Just because I don't go to Starbucks and get some special fancy way of making my coffee doesn't mean that instant coffee is bad. It tastes phenomenal, all right? It tastes freaking phenomenal. NVIDIA, $30 billion into OpenAI, per the Financial Times. That is what NVIDIA will be investing. That came out last night. Hasn't been confirmed by NVIDIA and OpenAI, but it has been leaked by the Financial Times. And obviously, OpenAI is getting ready to raise this $100 billion. And I think some estimates are showing a $150 billion round of capitalization. So they're going to have more than enough money to do what they need to do. And obviously, Sam Altman will have enough money to buy his chips. I think this is a really good headline for a couple of reasons. Number one, NVIDIA has a lot of cash. They need to deploy that cash. And the fact that NVIDIA is, if they are going this heavy into this OpenAI round, means that's basically half their cash reserves. They have $60 billion. If they're putting $30 billion into this one round, then although it's not the $100 billion type of deal that we heard about last September, Jensen is still pretty confident on OpenAI, which is a good thing. Number two, if you own Oracle or Broadcom or AMD, these are public companies, or Microsoft that OpenAI has said we are going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars with, literally hundreds of billions of dollars, then they need the capital to be able to continue growing. And if they can get that capital from this funding round, have it secure, I think that's one of the first things that can kind of get the market to move on from this like AI fatigue that they're having, especially based on that Brad Gerstner interview that they had with Sam Altman, which kind of started this entire sell-off. Maybe if he actually secures the funding, we can get to a better degree of momentum when it comes to AI. So I thought that was a good headline. I think it's important. If OpenAI continues to have the capital, they can obviously buy the chips. Good for AMD, Broadcom, NVIDIA, Oracle, etc., and good for the broader AI ecosystem. AMD right there, that's down about 1% in the pre-markets. NVIDIA down about 0.5% as well. Broadcom tried to make a move yesterday. It did end slightly green, but it's down again 1% in the pre-market. And then you got Oracle, which actually was green yesterday, but again, it was green by 0.24%, nothing really special, down 1.29% in the pre-market. $30 billion is less than the initial $100 billion investment, so NVIDIA goes up potentially. Remember, Jensen said that $100 billion would be deployed over time, not at one go. So yes, maybe they're not going to invest the extra $70 billion, and that's a good thing because NVIDIA is not going to have that much of an OpenAI risk. But it's also good to see they're at least investing something, right? Because imagine NVIDIA didn't invest anything. That would be like complete lack of confidence on their side around OpenAI. And you don't want to see that, given OpenAI is one of the biggest foundation model companies that's actually growing. I was doing some research last night, and from the sources I saw, OpenAI is adding 800,000 users a day to their platform, which is kind of crazy, dude. And I don't think Claude is adding that much because obviously Claude is not as focused on the consumer. They're more focused on the enterprise. But I mean, the fact that they're adding almost 1 million people a day to the platform, if they can monetize that effectively, that's going to be one of the things that we're going to see come out at a higher level. And that's probably going to be good for the broader AI ecosystem as well. Yes, OpenAI and Anthropic are hiring for a Salesforce administrator. I saw that as well. Anthropic has already hired 5 different previous Salesforce executives to lead their go-to-market strategy on a CRM. So when the market says, hey, we think Anthropic is coming after some of these SaaS names, Salesforce in particular is one of the names that Anthropic is explicitly going after, literally hiring people from Salesforce in the past that have led GTM strategy on implementing enterprise software, particularly around CRMs. And, well, Anthropic's going to have to do what they do. And if they do it effectively, then, yeah, that could be a potential headwind on Salesforce. AppLovin, that was a headline from yesterday. AppLovin was up about 9%. Now it's only up 2.8%. A lot of pumps in this market don't last as easily. Speaking of OpenAI, AppLovin potentially is going to be partnering with OpenAI to implement the advertising technology within the OpenAI chatbot. That would be kind of crazy that OpenAI is deciding to use AppLovin's ad tech technology to implement advertising within the product. It would go to show the sophistication that AppLovin has, and why the street is so excited about their growth, even though they're a SaaS name and the thing has been sold off. Thing hit 440 last night. Now it's back at 424, but that was one of the headlines that got AppLovin to gap up and got the street to give it some more momentum. The best earnings that we had yesterday, quite frankly, Celsius also pumped because they said some stuff that was positive around the Pepsi partnership on an investor call yesterday. It wasn't an earnings, it was an investor conference. That's why Celsius got a bit of a move. But Opendoor, folks, this is the stock that is up 16% right here in the pre-market. They still lost money. They did beat revenue by about $100 million, but they guided for fiscal year 2026 profitability, which I do think is pretty bullish, because if they can be profitable by the end of the year, that would be something the street would be excited about. Here's what the CEO of Opendoor said, and I guess the question is, after you watch this, do you want to buy any stock in Opendoor?
Look, I'm just answer your question a bit personally first. I am very highly motivated to see Opendoor's stock price go up. Right? My family is the most levered family in the world on Opendoor stock. My salary is $1, and unless stock levels see levels they haven't seen in years, I don't get paid. So I don't want you to take what I'm about to say the wrong way, but I just want you to let me say this. I don't manage the stock price. I manage the business and look at what we're building. Now, my responsibility is to create shareholder value. That's literally my job, to create value for shareholders whom I deeply appreciate. But I fulfill that. I fulfill my responsibility by not looking at the stock price every day. I fulfill it by building something people want and value. The stock price will follow. It literally always does.
I mean, I don't know if that's going to make me want to invest in Opendoor, but you do see a relatively passionate CEO who is talking directly to retail investors and trying to get them to hold on to the stock based on the idea of saying that he's in it with you. He is pretty levered on Open Door. I mean, he doesn't make any money unless the stock goes higher. So he has taken a pretty big bet. Again, Kaz, former Shopify executive. I mean, sometimes an investment is just a bet on the person running the ship. And I think the way he's talking to retail will definitely get them to continue holding onto the stock. 15.9%. Again, they beat on revenue by a pretty wide margin. If they can actually get to profitability by the end of the year, not the easiest thing to do. Mortgage rates coming down would definitely help them get there. That's the sort of natural tailwind. By the way, mortgage rates have got to the lowest level they are in, I believe, since 2024, if I'm not wrong. Let me pull up the exact mortgage rates here. But we are coming in lower than 5.9. If that thing can get down to 5.5, yeah, 30-year mortgage rates at lowest level since 2022. I'm looking at on a 30-year, yeah, around 5.8, 5.85, just below 5.9. I mean, that thing gets anywhere near 5%. That would be very exciting. So we do have the lowest right here in 4 years on mortgage rates, and that could be a natural tailwind for Open Door. UPS guy got coffee in prison. Why do you guys hate instant coffee so much? It's so easy. I never knew you could just heat up water and throw the coffee in there and start mixing it together. Like, it's really, for someone who barely drinks coffee and just needs like a sip of it in the morning, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely incredible. So I think the hatred on it is a little intense. My mortgage is 4.7%. Yeah, I mean, and especially if you bought your home 3-4 years ago, you know, those mortgage rates have come down substantially because it's not coffee. I'm going to go get the instant coffee and show you guys. It definitely looks like coffee. Okay. They have different flavors. You have dark roast, French vanilla. I think it's easier than going to get some coffee. OpenAI's 200-person team develops AI devices, including a smart speaker. Wow. Okay. So the information reporting these AI devices are only heating up at OpenAI. We know that there's a pendant. We know that there's headphones, and now we are seeing a speaker as potentially being rumored from the information around OpenAI. Again, I am pretty bearish around hardware AI devices. I just generally don't care what the company is. I really don't think there's going to be that much momentum behind them, especially the glasses. But OpenAI has a lot of users, and if they could sell their users a product and then meaningfully keep them wrapped up into the OpenAI ecosystem, which again, Apple's going to want to do that, and Apple has a hell of a chance to make that successful, given they have all of us already using their products. That is going to be a moat, theoretically, that OpenAI could develop. Again, Anthropic are really trying to develop a moat in the enterprise, and I would say they're succeeding with that. OpenAI trying to do it with the consumer. They've got Google breathing down their neck. Google put out a bunch of different products this week around photos and music that they're implementing within AI and Gemini. So it does look like OpenAI is going to have to do something effective to maintain their stranglehold over the consumer. S&P 500 right there, down about 0.2%. Not too bad of a reaction. Remember, at 10 a.m., we might be getting the Supreme Court decision. We are getting some type of opinion. I don't know if it's going to be for the tariffs. If it is, this Friday is going to flip really quick, either green or red, but we will probably see a market moving event. So at 10 a.m., we should see if these tariffs end up lasting or not. All right, let's talk about some geopolitics. The Iran headlines continue to make it seem like things are going to be pretty aggressive. As you can see right there on the screen, the U.S. has now assembled its largest military force in the Middle East since the 2003 Iraq invasion. This is from the Wall Street Journal, which includes 2 aircraft carriers, 12 warships, hundreds of fighter jets, multiple air defense systems, 150 U.S. military cargo jets, another 50 fighter jets in 48 hours, and F-35s, F-22s, and F-16s. Oil prices obviously are pretty high as a result of this happening, and those oil prices being higher, you know, they're slightly lower in the pre-market today, but it's not a good thing if we want to get gas prices under control. So that's also something that, you know, the street's going to have to watch out for. Definitely the White House is going to have to watch out for. The biggest thing that we got yesterday on these Iranian headlines is what Trump said around the concept of peace in the Middle East. In particular, we had one quote where he talked about, we'll find out in about 10 days what ends up happening.
The nuclear potential. And when it decimated that, all of a sudden we had peace in the Middle East, because there was a black cloud hanging over the Middle East. And if that wasn't done, that cloud would have been there. And countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Qatar, countries like, nobody could have signed. You would have had that threat, nobody could have had. You couldn't have had peace in the Middle East. So now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not. Maybe we're going to make a deal. You're going to be finding out over the next probably 10 days. But this meeting.
So, the Wall Street Journal reported this as well. This 10-day thing, it might end up being like 3 days over the weekend. So, I think we're going to find out pretty soon if we are striking or not, or if Trump is just using this as negotiating leverage. But it's one of those things geopolitically that I don't know exactly how markets going to react to. Usually it's a buy the dip if this stuff happens when it comes to geopolitical turmoil. But is it even a dip? Do we even get affected by it? Are we going to actually put boots on the ground in Iran? Those are all different questions that I think are looming over this market. And obviously we don't have the best answers to what exactly is going on here. But hopefully at 10 a.m. we at least get some answers around more with Supreme Court. Now, Trump had a bunch of other quotes yesterday as well when he was talking about the economy. He did like a rally around the economy last night. And yeah, look, I think the one reason to be bullish on the market outside of AI, Fed rate cuts, all that stuff, is that this guy really cares about the stock market. And he's not going to let the stock market easily fall, because then he will not have nothing to brag about.
Very good. But a good family. The stock market has set 53 all-time record highs since the election. 53. Think of that. 53 days it was at an all-time record, adding $9 trillion in value. But you got to go back for a second. So we do over 18 trillion in 11 months. And Sleepy Joe, for 4 years, did much less than $1 trillion. Think of that. This country would have been dead. Adding $9 trillion in value to your savings. I added $9 trillion, and your retirement accounts and 401ks are at the highest level they've ever been. This country. And here's an example of it. Nice family, by the way. That's better looking than your crane.
So again, Trump talking about the stock market is up. I added $9 trillion to your savings. Like, if the markets were to collapse, like all the bears are saying, we're going to get some massive 20-15% collapse. Everyone's hedged for it. I don't know how Trump's going to be able to be in front of an audience knowing that the labor market's kind of weak. Yes, maybe affordability is okay. Gas prices are down, but everyone's 401ks and retirement accounts are hit pretty bad. And, that could happen. It happened under Trump before in 2018, right? The stock market crashed. Even though that was for a variety of different reasons. Towards the end of the year, we were raising rates, all that stuff. But I think that's it. I think there is a Trump put on this economy, because the Dow being 50 is something that he cares about, and he wants the Dow to be 100, which means investments in the United States hopefully will do well over the long term. But it's not a guarantee that he's going to keep the markets pumping. But it is something where if we do get a 10% collapse and Nvidia gets like 130, 140 or something crazy, I think you're going to get the administration to step in and try to make sure that assets do prevail. Google right there, that's up a little bit in the pre-market, up about 1%. Texas Roadhouse had a good earnings. That's up 2.45%. They beat on the top and the bottom as well. Open Door, again, relatively good earnings. Micron's flat in the pre. ASTS is down 1.4. Nebius did get the 107 close yesterday. That is down. Everything's pretty much down pre-market. D-Wave's down. John Deere is down. Figma's down. Rocket Lab is down by about 0.5%. Celsius, AppLovin, and Open Door are the names that are green. Palantir, I believe, is down. Robinhood is also actually up slightly. SoFi, 1914. That went almost below $19. I think the market will be waiting on the Supreme Court decision. And we should be getting, hopefully, that decision at 10 a.m. And then we'll keep going from there. By the way, this is the instant coffee. Okay? This is phenomenal. Literally, all you do is take a spoon, scoop it, and throw it into some hot water. That's it. That's all you got to do. You don't need no Keurig machine, nothing fancy. You need to go to Starbucks. That's it. I think this was like $5. People pay $5 for a cup of coffee. This whole thing, 105 cups. Okay? For all those things, disgusting. It's quick. It's efficient. It's easy. And that's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. Short Starbucks. Exactly. We need to short Starbucks. I mean, this is easy. Why would you go to Starbucks when you have this? I don't get it. I don't know why people are obsessed with actually getting coffee. Dude, it's not even about being cheap. I was like, oh, this is an easier way to drink coffee. That's all. That was the reason. All right, some other headlines. Sam Altman went to India and he said they are growing really fast in India. He sat down with Prime Minister Modi. Great meeting with PM Modi today to talk about the incredible energy around AI in India. India is our fastest growing market for Codex. Codex is their coding platform. It's highly competitive with Claude Code, which was growing pretty fast over the past couple of years. Up 4x in weekly users in the past 2 weeks alone. Codex is one of those things that I don't know if it's getting as much attention as Claude Code is getting, but India obviously has a lot of software engineers. IT is, one of the biggest sectors in the country. So it makes sense that AI is growing rapidly, particular for the coding use case inside of India. Obviously, Gemini is going to want to be there. Anthropic's going to want to be there. OpenAI is going to want to be there. Meta is going to try to be in there. But all these tech companies are going to be competing for 1.3 billion people and their attention with AI, which should lead to better products and services. So you got Sam Altman inside of India trying to show that they have momentum in the country. Macro data. Let's look at this. This is very similar to the Bank of America data I showed yesterday. The Bank of America data I showed yesterday said that retail's buying the dip. Hedge funds have sold at the highest level since 2008. It's the third highest level since 2008 last week. Looks like Goldman Sachs is actually sharing the same type of data. Gross leverage for U.S. long-short funds has fallen by 8.6 points so far in February, which is one of the sharpest monthly declines in Goldman Sachs data going back to 2016. This is around hedge funds in particular. Against a more challenging performance backdrop and tougher technicals, hedge funds have turned more defensive and net sold U.S. equities month to date at the fastest pace since March 25th of last year. Remember, March 25th was right before we ended up leading to that April Liberation Day issue, right? So that March last year was, we saw a pretty aggressive sell-off. Obviously, April was really bad. But the fact that hedge funds are deleveraging at the highest level since March of last year, you can see right there on the reducing risk scale how those bars are coming to some pretty high levels. It does go to show that even if funds are going to get back into the market later, 100% they're dumping right now. And I'm sure obviously some fund managers and money managers are adding money into the markets, and that's why you have the markets stable and not just completely falling out. S&P barely up or down 1% over the past year, but it does mean that there is a divergence between retail that says, hey, AMD at 200 is a dip, versus hedge funds that are just not touching it ever since it fell from 250. For whatever reason, they're not touching it, and maybe they might come back in when it gets to 220. But as of now, it's retail versus institutions. Last time this happened, around the same time, retail ended up being right. And retail was right in a really, really strong way, and it led to massive outsized returns. This time we're going to see. But you have multiple pieces of data now that we're looking at that says, yeah, institutions are deleveraging a bit, and retail is more so leaning in to what ends up playing out right now. Jamie Dimon sold $21 million of the bank shares on Thursday. Dimon began selling in 2023 after holding stock for most of his 20-year tenure. All right, so JP Morgan, CEO, dumping some stock as well, which is not too crazy. Again, Jamie Dimon did not sell stock for a long time. So whenever he sells stock, you can't be too upset about it because he really did hold JP. He diamond hand JP Morgan for about 20 years. He previously sold 180 million at the end of 2023. He still owns 6.2 million shares worth $1.9 billion as well. So that's what we got with some of these macro updates in regards to hedge funds and institutional investors. Trump did say he is going to declassify aliens. Yesterday, he blamed Obama for talking about aliens publicly. Trump said he is going to declassify a ton of stuff around aliens. So I guess we're going to get more files. Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, and identifying flying objects, UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. So there you go. I guess we'll get some details from that soon. Blue Owl Capital, they're live. A lot of different issues around, or at least perceived issues around liquidity and credit redemptions. Let's go to them and see what he's saying about the newest fund they're launching.
Being here
Great,
as well.
thanks for having me.
I want to start off with the 1.4 billion because today's story or the focus on Blue Owl now has been around the sale itself. And I guess my first question would simply be, did you sell a cross section of loans from across Blue Owl? So, whatever percent of this and this and this, whether sector or companies, or was it you cherry picking the loans that were a particular, value, and therefore you could sell at what was 99.7 cents on the dollar?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to clear it up, because I think there was a lot of confusion, in part because the headline said we were halting redemptions. We're not halting redemptions, just changing the form, and if anything, we're accelerating redemptions. But to your question,
yes,
we sold $1.4 billion across 128 names in the portfolio. It represented a cross-section of about half the book, generally consistent with all of our industry sectors, all the types of loans that we make. And we sold them at par, fair value 99.7. I think most in the industry that follow this say the ability for us to sell that size at these prices is actually a validation of value. And people have been asking questions about marks, and here we are with significant third-party sales at par.
So again, right to that point, then you would argue this is a reflection of the overall credit quality of the portfolio, not you selling what you knew you could sell.
We had ample demand for these names. We certainly, as you know, this particular transaction is a result of us calling off a merger of one of our smaller funds. In November, I was here. I said we have a number of options. We're going to come back relatively quickly and outline those options. This fund originally was raised about 9 years ago. The plan was either to IPO it, merge it. We tried to merge it, wasn't the right time. Or the third option was to return the capital to investors. We wanted to accelerate the return of capital to investors, so we opportunistically chose to sell a fairly sizable chunk. It's about 35% of the fund, OBDC2, and instead of doing a 5% pro rata tender for investors, where they have to choose whether to sell or not, and it can place investors that don't tender in a disadvantaged position. We said if a fund is more in a return of capital mode, it's much wiser to do it pro rata, but also, and this just wasn't picked up, we're returning 30% of the capital, 6 times the amount that we would have otherwise been doing.
Understood. I want to.
At the end of the day, there are issues in private credit. And I think the most important thing for retail investors is to just be careful of private credit, whatever private credit funds you get pitched, the fact that Trump is letting private credit get into your 401k. I mean, there were some really, really bad deals done in 2020, 2021. Even before 2020, interest rates were damn near zero, right? So money was very cheap. And you're seeing that with Klarna right here. I mean, the reason Blue Owl is suffering through all this public scrutiny is because at the end of the day, there are issues inside of the funds. And maybe they're not coming up at the most egregious levels right now. I mean, look at Apollo, down 30% this year. KKR, down 30% this year. Blue Owl, down 24% this year. Klarna, down 27% yesterday. A company that was sort of hyped up by private equity for years, and the VCs probably did not deserve to go public. I mean, the stock's now worth $9 billion. They raised at $40 billion at one point. So private equity has issues. I don't know if it's like 2008 mortgage crisis issues, but it's definitely issues that could turn into something more extreme. And, the best thing I think is just to not be as levered against private credit if we do see some broader issues. Supreme Court news, maybe in 40 minutes. Let's get an update on that. Hopefully we will see. I'll put a poll in the chat as well to see if people think we'll actually get a decision on the tariffs today.
Legality of President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs this morning, or a ruling on whether the president can fire Lisa Cook from the board of the Federal Reserve, but there's just no guarantee. So let's start with tariffs. There are literal billions of dollars at stake in the decision on whether the president's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which people in Washington call IEPA for short, was appropriate, because that statute authorizes a president to regulate international commerce in an emergency, but does not mention tax or tariff power. Now, the decision won't affect all the tariffs that President Trump put in place last year because he used other authorities to impose some of those tariffs. But of the $293 billion in total tariff revenue collected in 2025 and 2026, so far, $133 billion of that was collected under IEEPA, and that money would presumably have to be paid back to the American companies that it was collected from if President Trump loses this case. And then there's also the question of the president's attempt to fire Lisa Cook as a member of the board of the Fed. At some point, the Supreme Court is expected to weigh in on whether the president has the authority to fire her based on unproven allegations of mortgage fraud in her personal residence. The question will come down to what the definition should be of a for-cause firing. Does that have to be adjudicated wrongdoing, or can mere allegations, even a president's whim, be enough to have the president have the authority to fire her? The way this.
So we're going to get a bunch of decisions today, potentially. The Supreme Court tariff decision, and then the ability for Trump to fire Lisa Cook. Supreme Court's also going to be making a decision on that. Now, maybe we get nothing. Maybe they're going to talk about like some free speech case that they're dealing with in Iowa. But maybe we actually get these answers. I kind of think we're not going to get the tariff decision again because the Supreme Court knows how serious of a decision that is, and maybe they still want to prolong it. But it's also like, at this point, it would feel like they're actively trying to suppress giving a decision in the short term. So, I mean, I hope we're able to get a decision today. Obviously, the markets are definitely going to move if we get it. But that's one thing at 10 a.m. we're going to have to watch out for. Again, PCE, for those that are just joining, came in this morning. It was a bit higher than expected. GDP growth came in at 1.4% versus 3% expected. It was not the best, but also we had a shutdown that affected it, and that's why GDP was lower, and kind of the market understood that. PCE came in hotter than expected on core and on the headline, 2.9 versus 2.8, then 3% versus 2.9. It's the highest PCE since November 2023. The Fed wants to get to 2%. We're at 3%, 2.9%. Now, Trueflation has this number significantly lower, and so their estimates are that the BLS is aggregating market data that is incorrect and really not looking at what the market data in real time should be for inflation. But nonetheless, those are the rates we have for PCE. Hassett, we got a quote from him. Hassett says Trump economy is running pretty close to 3%. That is fair. Again, without that shutdown, we probably would be at 3%. But that shutdown is kind of what created some pain. We get PMI today as well. Oh, you're right. We do get PMI today. Okay, so not only do we have the Supreme Court thing at around 9:45, so in about 20 minutes, we have PMI. We also get home sales at 10, new home sales. We also have consumer sentiment. Okay, so from 9:45 to 10 a.m., we're going to have a lot of macro data to look at. And then at 10, maybe the Supreme Court decision as well. By the way, Elon liked to post on X around making a super big robot, as you can see right there. So maybe the robots are coming and they're going to be crazy when they do actually get shipped. But yeah, Elon's excited for more robots. One of the things we were talking about yesterday is the CapEx cycle for NVIDIA continuing. And the way for it to continue is for it to include robotics as a essentially S-curve that would allow them to sell even more chips well beyond the data center GPU chips that they're already selling. But Elon is the only person. Yeah, honestly, Elon is really important because I think he's the only person right now that could ship 1 million robots in a year. And maybe that doesn't happen in 2027. Maybe it happens in 2028. But if he can even ship 100,000 robots powered with a lot of chip infrastructure that these AI companies are creating, that would be another tailwind to tell the market, oh, if there's billions of these that are going to be walking the planet, yeah, we're going to need a lot more chips. And NVIDIA's cycle is not going to slow down anytime soon. So, I mean, Tesla being able to get those out into the world, even if you don't own Tesla stock, is very important for this like broader robotics thesis to continue. Now, remember at CES, Jensen talked a lot about, I think he spent like 30 minutes talking about robotics, but realistically, no company has meaningfully put robotics out into the world outside of some of the Chinese humanoid robotics companies. And then you have Amazon doing stuff, but like the actual humanoid robot, billions of them, or at least millions of them being sold to consumers, we don't have that yet. That iPhone moment for robots has not happened. And I don't know if Cosmos or the synthetic data that NVIDIA is trying to push out to people is going to make it happen. I think it's going to have to be a company like Tesla. And hopefully that does happen in the coming years. NVIDIA right there, down about 1% in the pre-market. Hassett says today's GDP report is somewhat disappointing. Hassett says on the NY Fed reaction probably got a little emotional, called for them to be disciplined for reporting on tariffs. Yeah, Kashkari was not happy that Hassett said that yesterday. So it looks like Hassett somewhat apologizing there as well. All right, we got 3 minutes. Let's see what happens today. G-Rail got hit pretty hard. This is a biotech. I am not in this one. I don't think a lot of you guys are in this one. It's down 50%. This is what happens with biotechs. This thing was up like 5x last year. You're going to have these drawdowns if you're in biotechs and things don't work out with the drug. So I don't know if this is a buy on the 50% dip. I would struggle to say it is, just given that when a biotech falls 50%, it's usually for a bad reason. We're not talking about 5%. We're talking about 50%. This thing got wrecked. But those are biotechs. And so you kind of got to deal with it. So again, at 9:45, we get PMI. We get new home sales. We get consumer confidence. And then at 10 a.m., we should be getting the Supreme Court decision. And hopefully that Supreme Court decision. Well, that's the other question. Let me do the red or green poll in the chat. I mean, what do we think? 74% of you say no, we're not going to get the Supreme Court decision. If we do get it and it's like reversing the tariffs, do we go up or do we go down? I mean, I honestly don't know if the market's going to like if we reverse tariffs. Like, I think my gut tells me they might. Nike and Elf should really like it because they've been complaining about tariffs for the past year, but not sure for every other sector would necessarily care. We're going straight down if they reverse it. Well, we're already red in the pre-market right now, so hopefully it's not as worse. Again, GDP 1.4 versus 3% expected. PCE higher than expected, 3% versus 2.9% on core, 2.9 versus 2.8 on the headline. Those are not the best pieces of data, but those are the pieces of data we have today, and we're going to see how the markets ultimately interpret it. Last 2 weeks have been ugly. Today, hopefully, is not as ugly on a Friday. But the Supreme Court decision, I think, at 10 a.m. will probably govern how this ends up playing out. All right, here we go. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It is Friday, February 20th, 9:30 a.m. Once again, the global capital equity markets, the stock market, is now open. All right, wake your ass up. Let's get into it. Palantir down 2.7%. Robinhood down about 0.5%. AppLovin, that's up 1.9%. Celsius 7.43 based on some of the stuff they said with Pepsi yesterday at a conference. So Celsius getting some love right there as that stock ends up going green. Robinhood slightly going green. Oracle, that's down 2.7. Salesforce, that's down 0.5%. NVIDIA goes red, down about 1%, 186.04. NVIDIA trying to potentially lose 186 as that stock is down. S&P 500 down about 0.3. CrowdStrike is slightly going higher, but got a green candle right there trying to break through. Palo Alto was down yesterday as well. Netflix down 0.5%. Zeta down 1.4. Bitcoin 66.9. OSS, it had a great day yesterday. Now it is down 4% on the day, giving back some of the gains that it had yesterday, almost up 30%. Google actually goes green, 305 on the Googs. Micron, 420. SanDisk, 625. That's green. Lunar, that's down 2.3. Redwire is down 2%. ASTS is down 1.8. All the space names are getting hit at the moment. Rocket Lab down 2.5. Wow, what is going on with SoFi? Goodness. Losing 19. I don't know, guys. This stock has really struggled to even stay within the range right there. 1898 down 1.5. Robinhood also is going green, which is weird because the fintech should be moving together. Where's PayPal? PayPal is slightly going up as well, so it looks like SoFi is the only one that's down there. Shopify is down 1.5. Adobe's down 1.3. Dutch Bros down 1.3. Bloom Energy down 2.8. Relatively red day across most of the bigger names. Cadence Designs is down 0.5%. Pinterest slightly green. Ethereum slightly green. Klarna down another 1.73% after being down what, almost 30% yesterday. That one is getting hit. Lemonade, wow, below 60. Dude, talk about a fall from grace. This thing was almost $100 3 weeks ago. Basically cut in half right here. But again, a lot of growth stocks are in the same situation. I mean, just completely getting annihilated. I don't know why it's down another 5% today, though. It was already down yesterday. So that seems like a continuation. Robinhood actually getting some momentum, 76.82. That's green, up 1.5. Palantir down 1.6. That one continuing to get a hit. Again, at 10 a.m., we might get the Supreme Court decision, and then we'll see what happens. NVIDIA goes green, 187, or not green, but like it's close to going green as it's getting right back. Oh, no, it's actually looking like it's about to go green. 187.30 on NVIDIA. Not too bad. Zeta is still flat. S&P trying to break green, but that one's still red. And then AMD down 1%. Figma is, are we green? Figma is slightly green. It's like a red waterfall. Yeah, unfortunately, across the board. PayPal, are we still red? We are slightly green, 41.92. Cheesecake Factory, that stock is down 1.3. Let's look at the semis. Well, first, let's look at the Max 7. All the Max 7 are red except Google and Amazon. Except Google and Amazon. NVIDIA potentially going for 188 right there. Tesla's red. Meta's red. Microsoft. Apple lost 265 yesterday, then it fell to below 260 right here. Google actually getting a hell of a candle. I don't think there was a headline this morning for Google, but ramping up right back into that 310 area. Amazon as well at 206. The semis are a mixed bag. ASML's green, ON is green, ARM is green, Micron's green. Everything else looks to be red. Qualcomm, Broadcom, Marvell, Dell, AMD, and SMCI. NVIDIA just went green. There you go. Just went green, 188 for Mr. NVIDIA. Google did release Gemini 3.1 Pro, and we looked at a bunch of different stuff they released yesterday in it, along with their photo app and music. I think it's version 3 model. So, maybe the street's reacting to that positively. Tesla's still red. Open Door, 12% move. It was 15. Still holding on to a 12% move is not bad. You got some momentum right there. Google got an upgrade to 410. There's a couple people on the street that have Google in the 400s. I think the average price is around 380. But not surprising that Google is getting upgraded into that 400 level. Adobe, where's Adobe? Adobe continues to go red, but it has a little bit of green candle right there. Again, in about 30 minutes, we might get the Supreme Court decision, and that could change a lot more of the dynamics right here. CoreWeave is down. Yeah, where's CoreWeave and Nebius? CoreWeave down 5. Why is CoreWeave down 5? That's ugly. Is Nebius getting hit too? Nebius is down 2. That's a little controlled. Iren is barely down. Why is CoreWeave down almost 6%? What happened there? By the way, Trump is hosting a governor's White House breakfast soon. So he's going to be live again. Apple confirms global event for March 4th will focus on new products such as the iPhone 17e and their new MacBook. So Apple's going to be putting out a new version of the iPhone 17 and MacBook. Tigris Financial adjusts price target on Alphabet to 415 from 280. Wow, that's a big upgrade. That's a big upgrade. Oh, is CoreWeave down on credit concerns? Is CoreWeave down on credit concerns? Yeah, Blue Owl. Wow. Oh, this is not that. Yeah, this is your answer, folks. Blue Owl shopped debt for a CoreWeave data center. Lenders weren't sold. Blue Owl Capital failed to secure financing for a $4 billion data center project in Pennsylvania. One lender said the lack of interest was due to CoreWeave's creditworthiness. AI data center investments face financing challenges due to concerns about credit risk. Interesting. So they tried to get $4 billion worth of lending secured for CoreWeave for a Pennsylvania data center. I don't know if that's the biggest headline. I mean, I think CoreWeave will find the money eventually. CoreWeave does have a lot of debt, though. I mean, for those that have looked at their financials, their debt to equity ratio is 3x. It's kind of aggressive, but they're also growing at a rapid pace. Adobe's still down. Cheesecake Factory still down. PayPal breaking out to 42 right there. CoreWeave down 6% on no one wanting to give them some money today. Blue Owl is crazy. Dude, I don't know how Blue Owl got to be the de facto financier of choice for all these companies, but Blue Owl's name is everywhere, whether it's Meta, CoreWeave, Google. I mean, they're taking on a lot of risk, and the tech companies have a lot of leverage with Blue Owl. But these data centers kind of have to play out for it to make sense. Hood is actually making a move, 77. SoFi going the usually SoFi and Hood have been moving together. SoFi's down 2.3, Hood is up 2%. Very nice to see, but Hood getting some momentum right there. Opendoor up 15%. Robinhood only down 1.5. AppLovin is up 2.7. Bitcoin's also not moving too much right here. Bitcoin, well, a little move, 67.1. Nebius flipped green. Yep, Nebius flips green. Oh, Trump says he's considering a limited strike on Iran. Cactus, do you have that exact quote? Do you have that from Air Force One? I mean, okay, he just said it. There you go. That's what everyone was expecting. If he just said it, then there it is. There it is. A lot of speculation on if he was going to do that. Nebius right there, 108. It looks like that might be happening. Google 310. Google 310. He's never explicitly said he's considering an actual strike. But if he is, I guess the market's going to have to price that in. But maybe the markets, quite frankly, have already priced it in as well. G-Rail again, still down 50%. CRM went green. Broadcom went green. Got about 20 minutes for the Supreme Court thing, folks. NVIDIA, 188. Nice to see. 188 right there on NVIDIA. Let's see if that can continue holding on, if we can get that back up to 190. Carvana, that's down 2.5. AXTI, this one also, I believe, had earnings yesterday. That's up 18% as well. CoreWeave still down 5. And you got Cheesecake Factory down 1.5 as well. Rocket Lab just flipped red. Hims flipped slightly green. DoorDash is red. Dutch Bros is red. Shopify trying to go green, but that one's still red. Silver's up 3% today. Gold and silver have been relatively tame this week. I've not seen anything too crazy. Gold's up 1.4 today. Silver's up 4.3 today. So gold and silver getting a little bit of momentum. Yeah, it's just a Bloomberg headline. Trump says he is considering a limited strike on Iran. Don't know where they got that exact quote from, but that's what you're seeing right now from Trump. Dude, why is SoFi getting destroyed right here? Good. What is this, dude? 2.7% down. I mean, SoFi's not in private credit to the extent that these other guys are. I don't see any headline. I don't see anything. I don't see anything. SoFi and Lemonade both getting hit. Lemonade right there down 5%. All banks are going down. Let's see. JP Morgan, that's slightly down. Bank of America. Bank of America is actually down 1%. KRE or regionals down. Regionals are down. XLF is probably down. Remember, Druckenmiller went super leveraged long on financials back in Q4. So he is on the side of financials. XLF is down. Yeah, I guess all banks falling means SoFi falls. I guess so. Celsius still green. Yeah, SoFi does have a deal with Blue Owl. That's fair. That was announced a while ago. Is that a deal that's like, but again, a lot of companies have deals with Blue Owl's a big company. I don't know if that means that's an immediate credit risk that SoFi has to deal with. But I guess that could be the headline to take it back down. XLF still down 0.5%. Google, one of the only Max 7s that's green today. Meta is also green. Meta almost breaking 650 right there, or trying to at least get close to 650. Applied Digital, NVIDIA sold out of their entire position this week. That's why that stock's down 2%. It was down 10% 2 days ago. SMCI down 1.4. Carvana getting a nasty red candle right there. Verizon's green. MicroStrategy's green. Where's John Deere? That stock is red. How about Costco? That stock is also red. Robinhood, 77.40, still trying to hold 77. Nvidia, I mean, again, it just feels like a back and forth choppy move. Nvidia just got rejected at 188.50, now slightly below 188. PMI in about 3 minutes. We'll see how the market reacts to it. And then maybe we're going to get the Supreme Court decision. Maybe. SoFi still has a high short float. That's also true. Then again, I mean, it's always had a high short float. The shorts have been winning on a lot of these names, whether it's him, SoFi. I mean, these names have been getting hit hard. And the shorts, if they shorted at the top, have been doing decent. Robinhood breaks 78. Google almost breaking 310. Touched it for a second. Rocket Lab just flipped green. Palantir trying to hit 134. ASTS 86.21. Celsius. Let me know if you guys own Celsius, if anyone in the chat owns it. I know this one's been a pretty heavy retail favorite name, and it was kind of stuck after it topped out at 99, but bottomed at 18, and since then it's more than a 2x. So this is a name that people have loved for a long time. Celsius right there, 47, 46. I think their drinks are not that good. I mean, I've tried Celsius before, and I just I can't. I'd rather have a Red Bull than a Celsius. I just really don't like the taste. But a lot of people drink it. Reddit, are we green? Reddit, we are green. Reddit got to 129 last week. Seeing a pump right there above 149, which is nice. Breaking 150 would be incredible. Yeah, decent chunk if you guys have Celsius. Dude, you drink instant coffee, don't talk. Look, the instant coffee, I did not expect to get that much hate on instant coffee. Literally makes your coffee instantly. I take 2 sips of it and I'm good to go. I don't need some sophisticated coffee in the morning. All right, PMI. Should be getting it in about 30 seconds. Let's see what we've got. Hopefully it's good. Let's pull this up. Amit is trying to help lower inflation by not spending on coffee. Exactly. I'm just trying to make sure we get this damn rate cut, dude. All right, CoreWeave getting wrecked, dude. 6% down. Goodness. It's hard to trust any of these pumps. Even Nebius now getting it. Nebius just hit 108, right back down to 104. I mean, man, these stocks are stuck in a range. Meta right there, 648 as well. All right, let's pull up the S&P. S&P just went green. Literally just went green. PMI, it's loading. Okay, Street wanted 52.6 on Global Composite. We came in at 52.3. That's a miss. Street wanted 51.8 on manufacturing. We came in at 51.2. That's a miss. Street wanted 52.5 on services. We came in at 52.3. That's a miss. We missed on all 3 metrics. Very slight misses, like 0.2, 0.3 misses. There's that little red candle forming right there on the S&P at 684.50. Let's see if it actually develops into something. If not, then maybe the market doesn't care. Yeah, you got 3 misses. Very slight misses. I mean, again, not catastrophic. And now we have new home sales in 15 minutes, and we have the Supreme Court decision and consumer sentiment in about 15 minutes. And that will be what really determines, if we get that Supreme Court tariff decision, what happens to the market.
Actually lower than 52.4, lowest read since it was sub 50, and that was July of last year. And this is the first reading, of course, that is that close to going back into that contraction territory. If we look at the service side, it's also less than expectations and sequentially lower at 52.3. That would be the weakest also since April of last year. Now, if we look at the composite, 52.3, we're expecting 53.1, 53.0 in the rear view mirror. 52.3 would be the lightest since April of 25. So these numbers come in light. 407 is where a 10-year is. It hasn't moved much. That's unchanged on the week, up a couple on the day. And very quickly, all the inflation numbers on everything, PCE, on the GDP, everything was higher than expectations. The only bright news on inflation was that the GDP pricing and core pricing indices were less than our last look, but at 3.6 and 2.7 respectively.
10-year, not really affected by any of these numbers. 4.07, at least it's below 4.2, which is really important. But yeah, these PMI numbers not that effective, or not that, I guess, impactful on the market or on bonds. Exact quote from Trump, asked if he is considering limited strike on Iran. I guess I can say I am considering that. That is your exact quote. At this breakfast for governors, that's where he said this quote. I guess I can say I'm considering that for Iran. Amazon getting a big move right there, or at least somewhat of a decent move, 207. Trump to travel to China from March 31st to April 2nd, as per the White House. Okay, so in about a month, we are going to see if Trump ends up making any meaningful deals with the Chinese right there. Okay, so that's what we got there. Again, in about 12 minutes, we should be seeing what ends up playing out exactly. 206.72 on Amazon, S&P right there at 684.60. Robinhood losing that entire pump. I mean, again, it's just back and forth every single day. Meta at least getting a 650 move right there, 651. This thing was struggling between 643 yesterday. Google right there at 310. Nebius at 104.99. That one's red. Rocket Lab 76.20. And Palantir 133. Fed Bostic says employers are more cautious about hiring because of the possibility of saving labor with AI tools. That is a reason for why we should be cutting rates. I mean, it's very obvious. Not only are we going to fire people, but we're not going to be. I mean, literally, look at the JOLTS data. We lost 500,000 new open jobs, or quote unquote new open jobs. That's because employers probably are thinking twice before hiring people if AI can do something as good as that. So, I mean, it would be important to see what we're looking at. This is another piece of data that we're looking at right here. Personal income and outlays for December 2025. Personal income increased by $86.2 billion in December. This is the data that came out this morning with the PCE. As you can see right there, disposable personal income, outlays, and savings up to $86.2 billion. It was about $830 billion in December in total, so it increased about $90 billion. And this is where kind of the consumer spending changes happened in December 2025. You got housing, utilities, which had the majority of it, recreational services, healthcare, financial services, gasoline, etc. This is going to be what I think the administration obviously tries to focus on throughout the end of the year, getting into the midterms, which is, how do we make sure affordability across these core sectors you're seeing on the screen where consumer spending is actually increasing? How do we make sure that's in a good spot? And with energy, they've done a pretty decent job, given oil prices are down and gas prices are down across the country. Housing is, I think, the next big thing. I mean, if they can get the average house in America right now, the median price is $415. The average sale price is $514. Now, that probably includes lots of investment properties and stuff like that. So let's call it in the middle, around $450 is the average price. But if they can get that number down, or at least open up the mortgage rate ecosystem, I think the number back in 2021 was $370 was the average price for a house. That would obviously be very exciting for the American public, and that could potentially make an impact in the midterms. Wow, CoreWeave loses 90. CoreWeave loses 90. Grab is holding 430. Yeah, usually in the midst of this sell-off, Grab tends to just sell off with it. But ever since earnings, Grab has been holding 430 to 440, which is at least nice to see that they haven't been just getting wrecked below $4, even on the earnings. GLW, that's ripping. Corning, that's up a nice 5% on the day. Again, that deal they had with Meta a couple of weeks ago definitely got the street's attention on future deals they can get. You haven't talked about the effect of aliens and on the market. Dude, if aliens can take us past 7,000 on the S&P, I'm all for it. If aliens can do that, I would like to know. That would definitely help us out. Celsius up 8. CoreWeave down 7. We got 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Let's see what the Supreme Court says. Mamba, thanks for the super chat. Amid, are we downplaying inflation risk, excluding shelter? Everything continues to rise and memory shortage will amplify electronic costs. I think there's a fair point that rising memory costs can definitely increase the price of consumer electronics. That's a very fair point, and it's documented well in the data. I think on a macro level, AI is very, very deflationary. I mean, there's not many examples where we can say AI is increasing the cost of goods and services. Every example, the biggest one being the cost of labor or labor itself being eliminated from the question, seems to make things cheaper. So that's why the Fed officials, the Fed minutes 2 days ago, they were talking about rate hikes. And I'm like, hold on, a hike? Like, it feels like Kevin Warsh is the only guy who understands that no, AI will fundamentally change the dynamics of consumer spending forever, just like the internet changed it forever. And this is just supposedly smarter than the internet by 1,000x. So like this should lead to decreased prices, and I think that means we need to lower rates. At the same time, though, even though AI is going to change the world, Nvidia goes red because why not? Why not? Nvidia losing 188 right there. Is XLE up? XLE Energy is down today as well. Kratos, yeah, wasn't this thing up 8% yesterday? It's down 3% today. All the drone stocks were up yesterday. Red Cat up a little bit right here. Ondas is flat today. Amid Silver is going to run again. You know, if it does, I hope a lot of people make a lot of money in it. But I can't do it. I can't stomach it. I can't stomach it. I just like the why silver up 5% today. Like at this point, I really do think silver and gold are being treated as speculation or assets to speculate on, which they shouldn't be. There should be some speculation in there, but 5% moves on these types of commodities. Like I understand Bitcoin and Ethereum going up or down 5%. These things should not do this, no matter how much of a super cycle there might be in silver. So I hope it goes up, but I really can't stomach the volatility of it. After seeing that 30% drop 2 Fridays ago, it was like, oh, yeah. People can wake up one day and just say, yeah, we don't want to play with this anymore. I mean, that was aggressive. That was very, very aggressive. Long term, I think they'll be fine, but I do think short term they have run up a lot. JP Morgan, that one's still flat. Lemonade down 4. What about the USAR names and the rare earths? USAR down 2.7, MP down 1.3. Earth names have not really been able to catch a bid. CRML, that's down below $10 now. Fed Bostic says developers across the board says it's hard to find the workers to build the homes that are demanded, leading to higher prices. Labor is tight also in agriculture and hospitality. Well, he's right about that. I mean, you're definitely not building homes at the level that you would be wanting to build them at. Lennar right there. That one's also red on the day. CRM goes green. Salesforce going up 188. That's up about 2%. And then Adobe going green. IGV as well, slightly green on the day. All right, so in the next 5 minutes, let's do a poll right in the chat. We are going to get potentially the Supreme Court decision. I mean, I hope we get it. If we don't, then we don't. We got to be ready to be disappointed again. Cruise lines are up. Yep, cruise lines are green. We had that activist stake in Norwegian that happened earlier this week. 58% of you said red. Here's the question. If we get, or let's do, what does the Supreme Court say? Overturn tariffs, let tariffs operate. Which one? What if it's like a 5-4 decision, one way or the other? Or what if it's like a 9-0 decision? Like, what if it's unanimous? Everyone's like, yeah, these tariffs aren't legal. Or it's 5-4. Nope, the tariffs are legal. Like, that's kind of crazy. The trajectory of American history on some of these cases, like Citizens United, have been determined by one vote. It's kind of wild. Then again, that is democracy, right? It's the majority, even if that majority is a little bit. But Yeah, they might be big. Or I should have put a separate option in that poll, or we're just not getting a decision, which is kind of what I think might happen. A lot of people saying no decision. All right. We're going to see. I've got everything loaded up. In 3 minutes, we will find out what happens here. Epstein estate agrees to $35 million settlement in victim class action. Wow. Epstein, $35 million for a class action lawsuit. Okay. Don't know exactly which victims this is for, but they are paying out about $35 million. By the way, Prince Andrew getting arrested yesterday, it wasn't because of his potential abuse of young girls. It was because while he was in office, or while he was serving his royal duties, he sent Epstein insider information, and the emails explicitly show that he sent him inside information around like certain things around currencies and schedules for certain leaders and meetings. So he didn't get arrested because of suspicion of like doing explicitly bad things with young girls. He got arrested because of leaking insider information. And I didn't realize that yesterday, that that's the reason they actually arrested him. It's kind of crazy. And the king was like, yeah, I'm going to let the law take its place. And, whatever happens, happens. So it is quite incredible, but that was the actual reason that they arrested him yesterday. Google right there, going for 310. Google going for 310, 309.30. Open Door still holding on to 16%. We'll get consumer confidence and home data at 10 a.m. as well. So I'll try to be managing a bunch of different pieces of data. Obviously, the Supreme Court thing is the biggest thing that we are looking for. But just be ready to not get it. We played this game 2 times. And last 2 times it didn't work out. Maybe this time it does. Just bought a few degenerate calls on SoFi. Dude, SoFi, I did not expect SoFi below 20. I really, this year, I did not think that would. I mean, SoFi is at the same level as that in January 2024. Like, and then it dumped and then stayed at $8 for a while before moving. But man, that's pretty incredible. Pretty freaking incredible. Or I should say January 2025. That's when it was at 18. And then it took that dump before ending up to recover. All right, here we go. 1 minute. 1 minute, 1 minute. Let's see. The Clarity Act, again, is not getting passed anytime soon. More likely around April. You're going to get updates on the Clarity Act. That's what Brian Armstrong said. So I wouldn't be expecting any updates on Clarity Act anytime soon. But hopefully in the next month or two, we get those details. Okay, we'll pull up the S&P. It's 10 a.m. It's 10 a.m. Let's see what we get. Do we have a decision? First of all, 5-year inflation expectations for the consumer confidence report, 3.3 versus 3.4. That's a beat. That's good. Expectations, 56.6 versus 56.6 expected. That comes in line. Current conditions, 56.6 versus 57.7. That's a slight miss. Inflation expectations, 3.4 versus 3.5. That is a slight beat. So looks like consumer confidence and expectations are relatively okay. S&P high of day, 685. 685. Supreme Court decision. Do not have it yet. Do not have it yet. Let's get coverage here, but I'll be looking for Supreme Court for the next couple minutes.
That would be the weakest since just January of this year when it was 56.4. But the 57.3 we threw out and changed was the highest since August of 25. So lost some ground there. Same for current conditions. 58.3 was our mid-month read, goes all the way down to also 56.6. And it really is weird because all these numbers are the same. 56.6 in this case would be the weakest since January when it was 55.4. And once again, expectations, they stay at 56.6. They are.
Okay, so again, expectations were a beat, which was good, or the consumer confidence was a beat against expectations. On the Supreme Court website, I'm refreshing right here. Not seeing anything yet. Nike's going up. Are we getting a pump? I'm not looking at the market. Oh, S&P is pumping. Can you guys see it? No, you guys can't see it. Okay, let me pull this up. S&P is pumping. I don't have the decision yet. I'm looking for it. Oh, shit. Trump's global tariff struck down by U.S. Supreme Court. I believe that's it. Trump's global tariff struck down by U.S. Supreme Court. Where's NVIDIA? NVIDIA's at 188.60, S&P 688. U.S. Supreme Court issues ruling and challenge the legality of Trump's global tariffs. What's the vote on this? Let's see what's the vote on this. Did they actually overturn it? Yeah, Supreme Court struck down. What is the exact... IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. Okay, hold on. What's the vote? I'm literally on the reading right now. What's the vote? Is it 5-4? I'm trying to see opinion of the Supreme Court. I'm reading through it right now. 1, 2. I think it's 5-4. Hold on. IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. Yes, okay, so that's correct. S&P 687. Trying to get the exact number here. Wow, they really struck it down, guys. They struck it down. Supreme Court rules against it. Oh my goodness. Nike's got to be moving here. Nike is moving. 68. That's up 4%. Elf, that's up 2%, 93. SoFi back to 19. Where's Hoodie? Hoodie is 77.50. S&P right there. NVIDIA goes red. S&P not really holding on to its pump, but it is there. What's the vote? I'm trying to see the exact count right here. On the PDF, they're not just telling me the exact vote. Let's see if we can get some coverage here. My goodness, the Supreme Court has ruled that the tariffs violate IEEPA, and the president does not have the authority. Wow, I wonder how Trump's going to respond to this now.
That's right. The Supreme Court has just issued a ruling here on the president's tariffs, the so-called IEEPA. That is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The Supreme Court was deciding whether or not that law was appropriately applied to the president's authority to create tariffs that he did throughout 2025. Now, this applies to all the president's tariffs related to what he called Liberation Day and that massive change in geopolitical and trade relations that we saw around the world. This ruling is now in, and we are looking at it right now, Carl. It's 170 pages, so I'm going to take a moment and read it here before I tell you what it says. But we do have the ruling from the Supreme Court here on the president's tariffs and whether or not they are legal or not. And we're going to go through it line by line here momentarily.
I have the same decision in front of me, Eamon. This is going to be a dense read.
6-3. It was 6-3, folks. 6-3. That's what I thought it was. That's what I thought it was when I was reading. I didn't want to say it, though, because I wasn't sure. But if you look right here, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson look like the three. I think that... Is that true? That would be kind of crazy. Aren't those the liberals? Did the liberals say the tariffs deserve? Is that true? Did the liberals actually say he should be able to do the tariffs and the conservatives went against him? Bro, that is wild. If Alito and Thomas and those guys struck it down, that means Gorsuch, Amy Barrett, right? That doesn't sound right, right? Yeah, it doesn't sound right. I don't think that's... I got to read through this again. We got to go through this document. We got to figure out who were the 6 versus the 3. I really do doubt the liberals would have said this. We should allow the tariffs to be in place. I'm gonna have to read through it and see. S&P though, that pump that we had, it lasted for like 5 seconds. It lasted for like 5 seconds right here. Thomas Alito and Kavanaugh dissented. Is that correct? That looks more accurate. Let me just see if I can confirm that. I think you might be right about that. Let's see if I can. Yeah, you're right. Kavanaugh and Alito dissented. Okay, so you had 3 of the conservatives. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So 6-3 decision. Thomas, Kavanaugh, and Alito. Remember, Kavanaugh was one of the guys that Trump put in there. And then you have Alito and Thomas that have been there for a while. They dissented. So Trump had 3 people trying to allow these tariffs to be in place, and you had 6 justices. That means Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch, which Trump also put into the Supreme Court in his first term, they went against him. The 2 justices that Trump put in the first term turned against him on a major policy initiative that he had, that he campaigned on for his second term. Wow. That is incredible. That pump is not lasting, though. So, unfortunately, I mean, the pump didn't really have any much of an impact here. Let's get a little bit more coverage and see what's happening. But my goodness. There you go. Now, obviously, Trump is going to fight this in court. He's going to say stuff about this. He's going to try to use emergency executive actions to go against it. But yeah, 6-3 with 2 of Trump's Supreme Court picks going against him here.
Trying to streamline that process. But there's still a lot to be resolved. This is a fractured decision. It's what some of us predicted. You know, when I noted after the oral argument was that it seemed to me like a majority of justices were not buying the tariff argument generally under IEPA, the statute. But they were all expressing different reasons, or many of them were expressing different reasons for their objections. So it's fractured in that sense. So we have to see how this is going to play out. But the pressure will be now not just on the administration, but on Congress, because I think that the public itself would not want to see a wholesale return of tariff money to the detriment of the economy.
Shannon Bream, you've been reading. What more do you know?
Well, so to this issue of refunds, it did come up, as Professor Turley said there during the oral arguments, this fact that there would be some unwinding in how you would do it. So whether or not the court told us in this opinion, here's what I found. We've got a dissent here from Justice Kavanaugh. And he says this, that there are other tariffs. The president's authority is not shut down with any other option, but with respect to this particular law, it is shut down. But then he goes on to say, one issue is going to be refunds. Refunds of billions of dollars would have significant consequences for the U.S. Treasury. This is in his dissent. The court says nothing today about whether, and if so, how the government should go about returning the billions of dollars that it has collected from importers. He says that process is likely to be, quote, a mess, as was acknowledged at oral argument. So he says here, as we continue to read through, multiple pages and multiple opinions here, that nowhere does the court in this opinion address how that's going to be undone. Justice Alito also asked about this during the oral arguments, and there was real concern about how in the world you do this. Justice Kavanaugh also talks about in his dissent, a lot of those costs have already been passed on to consumers and collected from them. So unringing this bell, the court doesn't seem to provide any guidance within this opinion about how that's supposed to be done, other than saying, under IEPA, the president couldn't have collected these various waves of tariffs that he did. He's got, as the professor said, many other ways he can collect tariffs. I've talked to Secretary Bessent and others about their backup plans and what they would do. They know they have to plan for that. So there are other tariffs they can do. But this sweeping big bite at the apple is not going to be allowed in a 6-3 opinion here by the justices.
Can I ask you one thing, Shannon? One of the things that Jonathan Turley said is that the economy is doing fairly well. And he said because of the tariffs, I might say in spite of the tariffs, there have been a lot of different things. For example, some of the tariffs that were suggested at the beginning on Liberation Day never came to pass, or they were pared well back, for example, on coffee or groceries, kitchen cabinets, things like that. So the president is wanting to use this as maximum flexibility. You interview a lot of people that are representing their constituents on Capitol Hill. One of the things that Congress has done in the last 25 years or so is just basically fritter away its responsibilities, letting the executive branch do a lot. And at this point, do you know, is there anyone there that has the ability to go to the White House and say, here's what we can do. Let's try to pass a law that will give the flexibility, give the law, make sure that it is within the Constitution, because the president has a chance to get this done before the midterms. but it would take a full court press and a lot of bipartisan support.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It would be a very heavy lift on Capitol.
That's not happening. As like the Congress is not going to come together and give Trump a 2/3 majority to institute tariffs. There's no way the Democrats are going to vote for that. This is done. Unless Trump refutes this and gets a legal loophole, which it's kind of hard to go against the Supreme Court. That's like the highest court of the land. It's over. I mean, they might find some way to implement some of the tariffs, but as of now, it looks like these tariffs are not really going to be implemented. The hard part about this, though, is that the Supreme Court didn't give any guidance for refunding the money. In fact, some of the justices are saying, oh, consumers have already paid for it, technically. So it is a bit iffy on how the money actually gets back to people now that it is overturned. One sec. Let me reshare that. Okay, here we go.
Economy. So the lower court said that the law here in question did not give the president that authority. And what we see here is the Supreme Court is upholding that lower court ruling. And I'm going to just find here another sentence, which is, I think, the key to the court's analysis here. And what they're saying is, based on 2 words separated by 16 other words in section 1702A of IEEPA, the words regulate and importation, the president asserts the independent power to impose tariffs on imports from any country of any product at any rate for any amount of time. Those words, the Supreme Court says, cannot bear such weight. So what the Supreme Court appears to have decided here, guys, is that ultimately the IEEPA statute was about regulation of imports, not about tariffing of imports. And if Congress had intended for it to be about tariffing of imports, it would have said so explicitly. And because it did not, therefore, the president does not have the power to interpret this law in such a broad way as he did. Now, what is the impact of this? Immediately, this is going to set off the food fight of all food fights in terms of how companies that paid those tariffs last year get reimbursed. The president of the United States has said that the U.S. government will in some way have to reimburse those tariffs, but the cost is so high to the Treasury. The president has suggested that the U.S. government may not be able to do that. So what kind of a situation are we going to have for companies that are trying to get reimbursed this year? That's going to be a fascinating fight. Whether or not the government tries to slow walk that or find some loophole or carve out, we'll see deeper down in this decision by the Supreme Court if they've given any guidance as to how that process should work. We don't have that right now. That might be material for a number of these companies, guys. So as we look through this, what we're seeing here is a striking decision by the Supreme Court against the president of the United States. We're also seeing here a lengthy dissent here from Justice Kavanaugh. So we'll get into his logic on why he's dissenting as we dive deeper into this, guys. Back over to you.
This is crazy, guys. Amazon's pumping because obviously tariffs are not good for their business. They literally sell stuff, right? And so the higher the tariffs, the increased prices, which could lead to lower demand, even though Amazon's done a very good job weathering the storm of tariffs. So Amazon right there getting a nice 2.3% pump. But this is kind of wild. Trump ran his entire campaign on tariffs. He spent all of 2025, the amount of time we spent analyzing the Korea deal or the India deal or the China deal or the Japan deal, all of it was rooted. The European $750 billion of LNG they have to buy, all of it was rooted on threats of tariffs. All of it, like the entire year. I mean, Liberation Day, everything that happened last year that was monumental or important for the economy or had somewhat of a resounding impact on the stock market had to do with the T word. And that has just been overturned in a pretty decisive way right here. A pretty decisive way. You got Kagan joined by Sotomayor and Jackson agreeing that IEEPA doesn't authorize tariffs, but says the court doesn't need major questions to reach that result. Gorsuch concurs. He supports the major question lens about the economy shaping powers don't come from vague statutory language. Barrett concurs. She said we have to narrow major questions into a clear statement, rule to Article 1. Once the statute isn't clear about tariffs, the case is over. Thomas dissented. He said tariffs duties have long been a part of the foreign affairs and trade power and wars against importing domestic non-delegation styles into this context. And then Kavanaugh, who Alito and Thomas agreed with, said we should treat IEEPA as an emergency tool meant for fast executive action, arguing that tariffs are a long-used national security foreign policy tool, and criticizes how the majority applied the major questions of this case. Wow. I mean, that is 6-3 is pretty damn decisive, dude. And the worst part is 2 of the people Trump picked 8 years ago just screwed him. I mean, there's no loyalty on that. I mean, they said, look, the Constitution does not allow you to do this, buddy. I did think it would be 5-4 if we got the overtime. I didn't think it would be that decisive. 6-3 is like, man, if you couldn't get your own Supreme Court justices to vote for it, then it just didn't have a chance to go through. Grab right there up 1%. Reddit's up a little bit. Corning up 6.5 as well. Now, bond yields are selling off. Why are bond yields selling off? Well, I think because my gut tells me the deficit is going to increase. Because although tariffs were, I mean, I don't think they were necessarily inflationary, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt. The tariffs were super inflationary. We were paying down the debt, the deficit. I mean, we were collecting $300 billion a year. It's almost $30 billion a month. So it was technically helping to, and it was one form of revenue besides taxes, income taxes, that was helping pay it down. So I guess that going away means yields end up spiking. Stock market doesn't, I don't think the stock market knows how to react to this, really, to be honest. Like, you had a pump, then that pump got faded away. I think there's a lot more uncertainty around who's going to get paid. Also, Chris had a good point in the chat. A lot of people are going to be suing the United States pretty damn soon. And when I mean people, I mean companies and businesses. I mean, if you're a company that had to pay, like, if you're a small business that does maybe, I don't know, 5 million in revenue, and you had to pay 750,000 in tariffs last year, and now you just, the highest court of the land just said, yeah, you shouldn't have paid 750,000. I mean, you're probably going to say, hey, like, it's worth paying for some lawyers for me to get almost $1 million back into my pocket. Now, the Supreme Court, again, does not give any coverage or any guidance on how the fund should be returned. But I would imagine there's going to be a lot of court cases if the U.S. government doesn't, like, officially signify them giving back the money. Let's get some more coverage on this, and then we'll keep going from there. This is fascinating. 6-3 decision. Supreme Court has ruled down Trump's tariffs.
And the dissent is right. It says very little about the refund issue, which is looming here so greatly. I think that the problem here is that the court is kicking this back on refunds, and it's going to be a mess. Congress has to decide whether it's going to intervene here. There's a lot of frustration that is reflected in these opinions and concurrences and dissent, particularly as to what is not said. I mean, the Chief Justice feels quite confident, as to, I think, a majority, obviously, that the tariffs are not included in this language of regulating importation. But they are less clear on probably the most practical aspects of what do we now do with all of this money that has been collected. And when I mentioned that, the economy is doing well, it's not that I think that the tariffs have caused the economy to do well, but returning this money could have a real impact on.
Necessarily from goods, so it wasn't necessarily a tariff story. It was more a services story on this.
Although I'll back you up there, because the PMIs that we got a few moments ago did mention, here's S&P, average input costs rose sharply again in February, linked to supplier price hikes, tariffs, and higher wages, feeding through to the largest increase in ASPs since August.
But if you look at where the numbers, what contributed to the stronger PCE, it was healthcare, it was housing.
Here's the quote on refunds from the decision. We're going to get a lot of these quotes soon. One issue will be refunds. Refunds of billions of dollars would have significant consequences for the U.S. Treasury. The court says nothing today, explicitly. The court says nothing today about whether, and if so, how the government should go about returning the billions of dollars that it has collected from importers. But that process is likely to be, quote unquote, a mess, as was acknowledged at the oral argument. That is crazy. Even the Supreme Court is like, we don't know how the hell you guys are going to return this money. It's probably going to be a mess, but we know you should have never collected that money in the first place. That is wild. The Supreme Court literally saying, yeah, good luck. We don't know how you're going to do it, but it was illegal in the first place.
Power to tax. Does that framework, how do you think that's going to be received by the legal community?
Well, I think that's probably right. I mean, look, when Congress decides to delegate a power, it has to be clear. The court's engaged in a number of decisions in recent years to make clear that if Congress is going to delegate authority, particularly broad grants of authority with no bounds around them, as the president would read IEPA in this case, it's got to do so with real clarity. It's this whole idea, this major questions doctrine that you've heard a lot of talk about. And so the court's reiterated that a number of times. That didn't used to be the court's view. It is the court's view now. And I think that's where the legal community is going to say, look, we could see this coming from these recent cases, limiting the ability of Congress to delegate its authority and making sure that if it does so, it does so in a very clear, specific way.
I mean, the administration has been prepared for this, right? It didn't come in the first few weeks of the decisions. We sort of knew, and they've got to be gaming this out. I mean, there's Section 232, which is sort of one of the easiest existing authorities that he could use for tariffs. There's also Section 122 of the Trade Act.
Rate cut probabilities are barely up. And I think part of the reason is because we might have more inflation if prices go down, because the tariffs potentially took prices down, which means people will keep spending. So although it's a little counterintuitive, I think that's why rate cut probabilities are not going up. It's at 6.1%. It was at 5.9% in the morning. So you're not seeing those probabilities change right now.
1974, where he can do 15% tariffs quickly, but only for a 6-month period. There's Section 338 of the Tariff Act, which allows up to 50% tariffs, but it's never been invoked. Section 301 of the Trade Act. I mean, this is kind of technical stuff, but there are other means for him to impose these tariffs, aren't there?
No, that's exactly right. And so, some of your viewers might be wondering, well, why didn't the president just go ahead and impose those up front? One, taking the view that they had of IEPA, I think they were thinking a couple of things. One, they could impose broad tariffs, move them around as they chose to, in part because Congress didn't put any bounds on this in theoretical authority in IEPA. They simply said the power to regulate imports. And so as a result, the president said, well, I can tax those imports, I can impose tariffs. That's a form of regulation. Now I've got complete free run room. I don't have to make any findings. I don't have to make any decisions other than there's an emergency going on, and this is my chosen way of solving for it. With all these other statutes, to your point, there are limitations. You have to make certain findings. You have to submit to Congress. You can only do it for a certain period of time. So it just makes it difficult. And so the president's, I think, theory was, if I can get this through IEPA, I've got broad authority. I can keep moving them around. If I make deals, I can reduce it as necessary. And so I think that's the idea here. Now they're going to have to go through. They probably do. If the administration was planning ahead, which I think I'm sure they did, they probably got a plan for how they will re-implement a number of these through these new authorities. They'll just have to go through the process of doing that. They probably have a break the glass plan ready to go, and they'll deploy it in the next hours, days, weeks.
What do you make of, I mean, from a legal perspective, the whole idea that we were just talking about before you came on of these refunds? Because I would assume the courts will be involved here as well in some fashion. It's very much unclear to any of us exactly how that would work. Do you have any ideas, Jamil, in terms of what at least a sequence of events may occur as a result of that?
I mean, this is exactly the right question to be asking. I think the question the administration tried to raise and saying, look, the court.
Trump has not responded yet. We're waiting to see what Trump says. I'm sure we'll get a Truth Social post in the next hour, but no response yet from Trump.
Shouldn't make the mistake of doing this. It's going to be a huge debacle to have to get these refunds back to people. And yet now we're in that position. The court did not take up that idea that simply because it would be hard, the court can make a decision on the law that it doesn't think is correct. And so the administration, again, hopefully has been preparing for this day, has a plan now how to do it. But what will ultimately happen, I think, is it'll go down to the lower courts. The lower courts will then have to handle this one specific case that's before them and provide the refund in that case. And then the question is, will the administration create a mechanism for all other similarly situated plaintiffs? Will they wait for the court to come in and impose a requirement like that in some sort of a broader suit? Or people have to sue individually to get their money back. And, it's open season right now. We don't know for sure. And I think that in part was why the administration was saying, you're going to cause a whole lot of trouble if you do this. And the court, I think rightly, said, look, we're going to do the law. You all figure out the consequences.
Yeah, that's there was so much.
This is crazy. I mean, There it is, folks. That's the decision. Stock market, I mean, it likes it, kinda. S&P up 0.5%. What are people thinking? What are people thinking in terms of the implications this will have? I think the first thing is, I said a couple days ago that the trade deals we have, I think, are important for a lot of different reasons. I mean, if Japan and South Korea and Europe come out and say, yeah, it's time to renegotiate, that's not going to put the United States in a position of strength. Now, you might have some leverage where Japan wants to keep good relationships with the U.S. for a variety of reasons, and Japan says, we're going to honor our agreement even if we don't have to deal with the tariffs, yada, yada. But I think that's going to be a couple of countries. I think the vast majority are going to be like, yeah, you tried to use that tariff thing, but you can't do it anymore, so we want to renegotiate. Until it's fully resolved, we're cooked. Market's confused. What about the deals with countries and companies? They were strong-armed because of the tariffs, even more legal problems. Yeah, I agree. I think it can create. There are multiple new ways he can enact new tariffs. That decision does not touch that. Look, that is fair. And Hassett has already talked about it multiple times that if the Supreme Court goes against them, they're going to use different loopholes to institute the tariffs. So it doesn't necessarily mean the tariffs are just gone by any sense of the imagination. But there are certain ones that are just not going to be able to be implemented. Oh, wow. EU spokesperson. We remain in close contact with the United States administration as we see clarity on the steps they intend to take in response to this ruling. Translation is, yeah. We are ready to talk. We just want to talk again. We want to have a little talk, We just gonna have some coffee, some instant coffee. We just want to talk about that initial $750 billion that we said we would give you. EU spokesperson, we take note of the ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court and we are analyzing it carefully. Yeah, the Europeans are definitely not gonna honor this agreement. It doesn't feel like that. EU spokesperson says we continue to advocate for low tariffs and to work towards reducing them. I mean, again, like just put yourself in their position. Like, if the only reason they agreed to a deal they didn't want to do is because of the tariffs, and now the tariffs can't happen, which, again, that's going to be up in the air exactly of how Trump implements it. Like, yeah, any normal person negotiating would be like, it's time to renegotiate. This is crazy, bro. Trump says SCOTUS ruling a disgrace. That's CNN. He might be in that governor's breakfast right now. We don't have we don't have a Truth Social yet. CNN reporting Trump says SCOTUS ruling is a disgrace. Trump says SCOTUS ruling is a disgrace. The EU needs the US 100%. Of course, I agree. Like pretty much every country in the world needs the United States to some extent. However, the magnitude of the deals that Trump was getting in turn, $750 billion of natural gas the EU committed to buy over the next 5 years. The linchpin of creating that type of a deal was, if you don't do this, we're going to tariff the shit out of you. Like, that's it. It's not too complicated. That's what happened last year with Trump and traveling across the world with every country he was talking to. I mean, if that changes, the dynamics change. Now, again, I do think some countries are going to not completely renege because they don't want to piss off the U.S. because there can be other things that could happen. If, like, Japan definitely doesn't want to fracture their relations with the U.S., and I think they're going to continue to spend the $500 billion they committed to spending. But the point is, you are going to have some people thinking we need to rethink this. This is crazy, man. Absolutely crazy. Let's get some more coverage on this. Again, 6-3 decision is what we got today against the Supreme Court.
Acknowledged at oral argument. So that question about what happens to this, to the refunds, is not really being addressed by the court. That's going to have to get kicked back to the executive branch for them to figure out, and it is likely to be a mess. Also, Brett Kavanaugh raising the concern here in this dissent that the court's decision could generate uncertainty regarding various trade agreements. That process, too, has been difficult. And that echoes, guys, the point that the president of the United States has made several times, which is the IEEPA unilateral tariff authority that he was claiming gave him enormous leverage to get other countries to the negotiating table and cut deals that benefited American taxpayers. Now, that leverage is gone, and you wonder how many countries are going to try to come up with an alternative to deals that they've already cut, or to get out of finalizing deals that have been announced but not yet papered and signed. So a lot of foreign policy implications here, a lot of trade implications, and of course the political ramifications will be enormous, guys.
Yep. Sorry.
I was just going to say, ultimately, I think it gets to, the having the president have executive flexibility in foreign affairs, right? That's ultimately what's at stake here for this administration, and what seems
that's
like
the way
what
the
dissent brought up.
administration. That's exactly what the administration argues, and what the Supreme Court here is saying. That flexibility is not in the Constitution. So unless Congress legislates it, you don't have it.
Right, and has not been used by any other president.
True.
Right.
At least as a tool in terms of those relations. Eamon, thank you. We'll be obviously getting back to Eamon Javers throughout the hour for more.
Okay, let's go a little bit more into this ruling. By the way, Trump just said he has a backup plan for tariffs after ruling, as per CNN. Trump says, I have a backup plan for, we knew this already, that he's going to have a different emergency action law for the tariffs. The question is, the administration is going to have to be really, really careful here. They're going to have to use whatever backdoor policy they have to keep the tariffs alive that doesn't go against the Supreme Court decision, which means it's going to have to be outside of the lens of IEEPA. And look, if they could have done it outside of IEEPA back in February of last year, they probably would have. So they're going to have to be very strategic here. And if it violates the Supreme Court doctrine, it's not going to work. So, we're just going to get into another couple months of them trying to justify how they're doing it. Reading through some more of the decision, looks like the Supreme Court is saying, this is the sort of summarized translation, you can't get a free pass around the major questions doctrine just because Congress passed an emergency statute. Emergencies don't magically expand vague laws into giant new powers. That's what Gorsuch and Barrett were talking about. There's no foreign affairs loophole either, which is what Thomas used to justify dissenting. Just because tariffs affect diplomacy and trade relations doesn't mean courts will back off and let the president do it under vague authority. And then tariffs are Congress's job unless Congress clearly says otherwise. The key line in the decision is the president must point to, quote, clear congressional authorization. If you don't show that, you can't implement the policy. Bostic just said, hard to know the fallout from the Supreme Court ruling on tariffs. It hinges on issues like need for rebates, and we are not sure how companies will react. Our market's going down. S&P, are we red? We're not red, but we're not as green as we were. So the initial reaction was super green. We saw like almost 690 on the S&P, which means the market liked it. And it looks like now, the market doesn't hate it yet, but Google 311. Market's definitely not pumping like it was before. Let's see if I can get Chris on the show. Let me call him right here, see if he's available. Get some of his thoughts on this. Chris, what's up?
Yes, sir.
Well, you're live, and I just wanted to ask you, what do you think of this decision?
I think they made the right decision by taking, a hard stance against the executive branch doing a little too much. I do think that the president should have the power to impose tariffs, but you can't do it on like a threatening basis based on how, it's emergency power, right? You can't just say, you know what, I feel like we're having an emergency right now. Let's go. You actually have some justification behind it. I think it's it is what it is. I think the bigger problem that we're going to run into is how do you get these refunds out the door? The government's going to have to deal with all the challenges. I'm pretty sure all these companies out there are going to challenge this, but it really does speak to the credibility of the president in being able to negotiate going forward. So a lot of countries, they're going to be sitting on the other side of the table, and he's going to say, well, I'm going to tariff you. And they're going to say, with what?
Right.
So what are you going to do then? So this is kind of the part of the president, like pretty much putting something out there and then having to backtrack and then having to deal with the fallout. And the other challenge is if Congress ends up flipping blue, both the Senate and the House during the midterms, then the president really is going to be in a really bad position, because that means that anything that he does is pretty much going to be overturned.
Did you expect it to be as decisive on the 6-3?
No. I thought that he would have more allies on his side. But then again, I mean, when you nominate someone to the Supreme Court, this is one of the main reasons why we should not try to expand the courts like the Democrats want. I think that's like trying to do that whole like, oh, we need more people on the courts, like pack the courts to try to get what we want. No, this is what you're supposed to have. You're supposed to have a point where people dissent. You're supposed to have smart people that argue against and for different things, and usually the right decision comes. I mean, sometimes the Supreme Court gets it wrong as well. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's plenty of things they got wrong and then they have to reverse on. But I think in this regard, they're probably right.
What do you think happens with refunds? Because again, it's almost like the Supreme Court was like, we don't know what you guys are going to do about it, but it's kind of not our problem. Do you think there's going to be a lot of court cases and people are suing, or how do you think the refund process goes through?
I mean, I don't care about the refunds. I care about what's going to happen to all the people who basically increased prices and now their margins just expanded. If you're Walmart and you were importing before with additional margins built in with a new price on the specific product because you had to pay these tariffs, now all of a sudden you pay no tariffs and you're getting the same thing with the same price that's out there. What does that mean? I mean,
well, but wouldn't consumers make them decrease prices, or you think consumers are okay with it now?
I don't think consumers have a choice. People got used to the prices, right? If you ever met a company that's like, yeah, let me lower prices? No, bro. Everyone is always about, I got these people hooked on $11 for this product. At the most, I'll turn it down to maybe $10.50 to give them a bit of a break. No one is going to be rolling back their prices to pre-tariff prices.
That's actually a good point. I mean, that could be really good for corporate earnings, to be honest.
And then, if you think about it, they will eventually get a refund, right? If they get a refund plus their margins have expanded, that's a pretty good deal. That just means that you lent the government some money for a year, interest free.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. U.S. Supreme Court decision on tariff reinforces Canada's position that IEEPA tariffs imposed by U.S. are unjustified. Okay, so what do you think that implication is going to be like? The countries that Canada, Europe, that hated it already, how do you think they're going to react to this?
I don't know, bro. This is a game of leverage. Trump at the end of the day still has other levers that he can pull. So I don't think that a lot of these countries are gonna waffle on him and try to renegotiate and do all the stuff that he definitely would have done if this went against their local policies. I just think at this point everyone is just, let's wait it out. With Trump, like he's got maybe 3 years left now, right? 2 of them might be as a lame duck. So everyone is just like, let's give him whatever he wants on face, but have no intention of actually completing everything that they're talking about. So, like, this is where he goes to the Middle East and is like, hey, can you do $100 billion in investment in America? And they're like, yeah, why don't we do $200 billion, Mr. President? But I don't think a lot of them have the intention to actually go through with the entire thing. And now that you're basically taking away all the mechanisms by which you could theoretically threaten people, it's a matter of time before everyone just kind of, at this point, Trump is like the old man that like just talks and doesn't really have a lot of meat behind what he's saying. I mean, this basically cut his nuts out. You just basically neutered Trump with this.
Do you think the deficit explodes? Because at least we were paying some of the deficit down, and now, that $30 billion a month we're collecting might not happen.
Yeah, no, the deficit's definitely going up. But then again, we also have a tailwind of disinflation that I think is probably coming our way over the next 6 to 9 months. I mean, the data that I'm seeing, and I really do believe in the true-flation numbers, that inflation is starting to kind of turn. So if inflation turns, and then we also see sort of a decline in CPI, that also means that our longer term rates might come down. I think the next Congress is going to have a very, I don't want to say they're going to have a fun time, but they're definitely going to be rolling back a lot of initiatives that the administration had with regards to the taxes and everything else, in which case the economy could be headed for sort of a headwind. But I don't know. This is all still very new as to what's going to happen next year. But I'll say this: this is a big strike against the president, a really big strike.
I agree. I think internationally, this is definitely a big hit against them. Last question for you, Chris. Stock market. I mean, should the market like this or the market hate this? Uncertainty, good, bad? What are you thinking about stocks?
I think certain sectors are going to do well, primarily because they were impacted negatively by the tariffs. And so you could see a nice recovery long term in them, right? So if you're a retailer, like you said with Nike, right? You followed Nike. Nike is up today. They've been heavily impacted by the tariff situation because most of their stuff comes from out of the country, and they can't exactly build like factories here that, do very similar production, like shoes, T-shirts. And once again, did it really make sense to import T-shirts? Yeah, of course. You don't want to bring back T-shirt manufacturing in America. You want high skilled labor here in America. You don't want to do the low menial jobs. But I also do understand that there was a level of outsourcing that should not have happened, where you're hollowing out the industrial base. But dude, if we can get T-shirts for cheap, I'll take it.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Thank you for your thoughts. Pretty crazy landmark decision right here. Chris's Twitter, I'll put in the chat, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care, brother. Have a good one.
Later. Man, what a day. What a day. Supreme Court officially striking down Trump's decision right here.
Of the autos and the auto suppliers that we want to look at. Let's first off look at the domestic automakers. And by this, we're talking about GM, Ford, Stellantis. We'll put Tesla in there as well, although the tariff implications for Tesla far different than what they are for the quote unquote, the big three. And the reason that these stocks, they moved initially a lot more, they've kind of regulated and pulled back a little bit. A couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, there has been a tariff headwind. As we've reported their quarterly results, they have said, look, it's maybe $500 million or $1 billion or $2 billion is what the tariff headwind will be. Still unclear how much of that will go away because of this decision. I should point out that Alex Partners has run the numbers in terms of what the tariff implications are expected to be in 2026. And for domestic auto production, it's going to be about $15 billion net cost. That's after all of the rebates for goods that are U.S. content, et cetera. It's about $15 billion. Another $15 billion for those vehicles built outside the United States brought into the U.S. We know that some of that is offset because of those offsets that we mentioned, but also the companies will have to eat it, as well as some is passed along to the consumer. Bottom line is this. I think what Charlie Barbinsko has just said regarding margins, I think that's true. You're going to see the auto sector being one area where that's a definite impact. In terms of the foreign automakers, talking about Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, the implication is a little less clear because remember, there have been some final trade agreements, as Sarah pointed out, that have been worked out with these countries. Are those still in effect? Are they not unchanged? If that's the case, this decision doesn't have a whole lot of implication there. And then finally, take a look at the auto parts suppliers. Now, these guys are probably the ones who are going to see the biggest impact here. But the movement in the stocks is not a lot because they're waiting to find out what happens with USMCA. That is far more important to the auto parts suppliers than it is to anybody else. And we know that agreement comes up later this year. How is that worked out? And what is the implication there in terms of production in Canada and in Mexico? So that's a snapshot of where we are in terms of what this decision means for the auto industry.
Auto is going to be, I mean, dude, there's so many industries that are going to be affected by this. Obviously, autos are a major one. The auto tariff debacle we had last year, so many headlines back and forth I remember covering around companies having to negotiate with tariffs and the president of GM meeting with Trump about it. I mean, NVIDIA right there did get to 189.30. If if the tariffs are gone and Trump doesn't have like a sophisticated plan to implement them, I mean, the autos should catch a bid if they don't have to pay as much for prices. And again, I think to Chris's point, if we don't reduce prices across goods and services, and I'm sure there'll be some reduction, but it might not be like pre-tariff levels, just because consumers are used to paying for it at that point, then yeah, that should be good for corporate profit margins. I mean, that especially, I mean, it might not affect like Palantir as a SaaS company per se, because they sell to enterprises, but definitely would affect Elf and Ulta and Nike and Estee Lauder. I mean, those companies would be affected by that. 113 up 1%. Yeah, Canada came out. They put out a statement. They said, we agree. The exact statement is, it reinforces Canada's position that the IEEPA tariffs imposed by the U.S. are unjustified. And then the EU came out and said, we continue to advocate for low tariffs and to work towards reducing them. I mean, you got a lot of our partners across the world kind of happy about this, it seems like. Seems like they're kind of happy here. Tanner will wear a white wig today. Oh my gosh. Well, that's what we got, folks. We didn't even look at home sales because of this. We were so focused on tariffs. Home sales, new home sales for the month of December came in at, Street wanted 710,000. We came in at 750,000. Not too bad. Not too bad. Okay, so we beat expectations, or we slightly beat. And then that was November. Then December came. The Street wanted 730. We came in at 745,000. Okay. Who cares about home sales? Well, that's the home sales data, but obviously the tariffs are what matter the most. NVIDIA 189 right there. Grab, did we get 450? Touched 450. Open door still moving. I mean, markets are green. Doesn't seem like the market really hates this. 687.90, highest we've seen since last Thursday. I wonder what their plan is, though, to still implement the tariffs. I mean, we listened to Hassett talk about this a month ago, but he was citing some emergency executive action thing inside of the Constitution. I don't know if it's going to be the best argument. I mean, it's got to be a hell of an argument for them to go against the Supreme Court. Like, the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. You don't easily get past that. I mean, this is supposed to be the final court that makes a decision. Amazon 210 right there, 2.6% up. Yeah, Section 122. That's what it was. Section 122. Let's use some AI. Let's go to Gemini. Trump's tariffs just got struck down from Supreme Court. Could the president use Section 122 to re-implement them? Let's see if Gemini gives us something good here. This is wild, bro. 6'3". Google's so smart. Look at that. Already knows exactly what happened. 6'3". How Section 122 works. Section 122 is often called the Balance of Payments Authority. It was designed to help the U.S. manage severe currency crises or massive trade deficits. Can it be used to re-implement the struck down tariffs? It is not a perfect substitute for IEEPA for several reasons. Lower rates. The administration had previously imposed reciprocal tariffs well above 15%. Section 122 would force a haircut on those rates to stay within the 15% legal ceiling. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Section 122, it caps off at 15%, right? Section 122, yeah, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 allows the U.S. president to impose temporary tariffs of up to 15%. So now, we weren't tariffing at 40, 50% like we proposed during Liberation Day, but I think South Korea, like literally last week, Trump was threatening 25%. So he has a max limit of 15% if he uses Section 122. Yeah, we can't do 150% anymore. Some legal scholars suggest the administration might try to reissue Section 122 every 150 days to bypass the time limit. There's a time limit on that shit? Holy crap. Well, that's why they didn't use this last year. I mean, obviously, IEEPA was a better route And then this, however, given today's Supreme Court ruling, which emphasized the taxing power belongs to Congress, not the executive, the court would likely view such rolling tariffs as a transparent attempt to subvert the law. Wow. Section 122 was written off during the era of fixed exchange rates of the gold standard. In today's world of floating exchange rates, many economists argue that a fundamental international payments problem doesn't actually exist, which is the justification to implement the law in the way the statute requires. This would almost certainly lead to immediate lawsuits. Guys, I think he's cooked. I mean, look, I'm not a legal expert, but those three statements right there, it's 150 days rolling, it's only 15%, and the statute by which you implement it probably wouldn't qualify for, given it has to do with foreign currencies, it wouldn't qualify for, a foreign policy national security threat, which is what Trump has been using to justify the tariffs in the first place. IEEPA kind of was a reasonable justification before the Supreme Court talked, but I don't know if Section 122 is going to actually hold up in any court of law, especially because, there's going to be lawsuits about Section 122 as well, just like there were lawsuits about this one. S&P trying to hit 689 right here. NVIDIA 190. NVIDIA, we touched 190, trying to get right back there. Section 232 and 301 could be used. Okay, let's go back to Gemini. How about Section 232 and 301? Could those also be used? I mean, look, I'm sure the lawyers of the White House are going to be working overtime to figure out if they can figure this. Oh, hold on. I have a graphic right here. Cactus, thank you for sending me this. This graphic actually is perfect. Literally, I don't even need to use Gemini on this. Look at that. All right, so you guys can see that. So Section 232 would be a threat to national security. You would need the Commerce Department, no limit on duration, no limit on tariffs. Section 122, again, 150 days, 15%. We just looked at that. Section 301, the only reason you can use it is discrimination against U.S. businesses or violation of U.S. rights. Trade representatives can implement it. 4 years limit, no limit on the tariff. Section 201, injury to domestic industry is the reason. 4 years may be extended to 8 years. 50% is the maximum limit on the tariff. Section 338, discrimination against U.S. commerce, no limit, 50%. Yeah, no limit on time, 50% is the limit on the tariff rate. Wow, Gemini gave me the same. Look at that. Dude, Google's good. That's crazy. I didn't even ask it to make me I didn't even ask Google to compare all three, and it compared all three for me in a graph. That is crazy. Huh. All right, so basically Gemini's saying it's possible, but they're going to have to really justify it in order to make it mainstream. I mean, there are routes, though. It's just, again, you forget the amount of routes they have, the time that the president, NVIDIA 190, is going to have to spend on this shit. I mean, he's got midterms coming up. There's a lot of stuff they have to focus on. Definitely something that's going to be a little bit more consuming for them to try to implement. Let's get a little bit more coverage here as well.
Here to weigh in on this, guys, as you look at this 6-3 decision, striking to me that two of the justices that President Trump appointed to the Supreme Court sided against him. Gorsuch and Barrett both sided with the majority here on that 6 to strike down the president's dearest domestic and international policy objectives. So that is a striking thing. And one of the reasons why presidents are often frustrated with Supreme Court justices is they have lifetime tenures and they can do what they want once they're placed on the court. One other thing I think we should really focus on, which we haven't had a chance to do yet this hour, is China. This ruling, we're looking through all the tariffs that the president imposed so far this year on China. This ruling will strike down all of them. You remember there was this tariff truce between the United States and China, President Trump and Xi Jinping back in October, where they lowered tariff rates. But all of the tariffs now that the president has imposed on tariffs in this second term, that the president has imposed on China in this second term, have been under this IEEPA authority. So all of those tariffs are now struck down. So in terms of the trade between the two biggest economies on planet Earth, China and the United States, this will have an enormous effect on that unless the White House can come up with some other authorities relatively quickly to impose tariffs on trade with China. Right now, there's going to be an open door in terms of tariffs between China and the United States, and that is the absolute cornerstone of the president's trade agenda, guys. So I thought it's worth focusing on.
On a day where we get his travel dates to China, Eamon. Right. He'll be there March 31st to April 2nd. Meantime,
we will have the State of the Union next week as well. I mean, the State of the Union, Trump's going to have to address the tariff stuff in front of the entire Congress. And until they have a solution towards this, he can't really brag about the tariffs anymore. He can't say the tariffs are bringing in a lot of revenue. They're not anymore. They're officially illegal. So that's going to be quite fascinating how he talks about that in the State of the Union. Take a look at this tweet. Ryan Peterson, who's the CEO of Flexport. Flexport is one of the largest logistics companies on the planet. It's a private company, but anyone who's worked in logistics has probably heard of these guys. Flexport built the world's simplest refund calculator brands can use to see what they're owed back. Wow. Literally, the first thing they do is launch a refund calculator for brands to be able to use to see how much money you can get back. It's almost like they were ready for this ruling. I mean, this is the whole point about money will be returned, and if it's not, there's going to be lawsuits. It's smart on their part. They're going to get a lot of traffic by putting out that tool. They had that thing talked, bro. They vibe coded this yesterday and had it ready to go. Look at that. Identification of eligible IEPA refunds, top 5 entries, automated analysis of your entry data. That is pretty incredible.
some items on the wire from the likes of, say, the British Chamber of Commerce trade arm, which argues that this is actually going to introduce more trade uncertainty.
Absolutely, it will. Because one of the things you have to bear in mind is a lot of these trade agreements with other countries where the president used that leverage of tariffs to get them to the table in the first place, and they announced a deal. A lot of those have not actually been ratified by the parliaments back at home, so they don't have force of law right now. So if you're a foreign country that was forced to the table by this threat of tariffs, and you haven't ratified your agreement yet, you might look at this decision and say, well, wait a second, there's no reason for us to ratify right now because the president can't hold this over our heads anymore. That's the leverage that the president was so frustrated about going away. It has gone away, and now we'll watch as other countries that have not formally signed or finalized those trade agreements, and there's a lot of them. I don't have the exact tally right in front of me. A lot of them have not been ratified yet by home country parliaments. I would imagine those countries will start to slowly walk backwards away from those deals.
South Korea is a big one.
South Korea, of course, comes to mind, given the president has already called them out for their failure to ratify and how quick or slowly things have been moving.
Well, they knew the longer they took, the more likely this decision could help.
Yeah, a lot of people were treading water waiting for this.
Although I asked Jamil Jaffer about this, and he said that actually he didn't expect much. We were just talking to him, expect much change because these are. Yes, they were negotiated around the threat of IEPA, but ultimately they were deals negotiated. So there's no reason ultimately that these foreign governments should go back on them because the White House Commerce Secretary, Treasury Secretary, they negotiated these separately, these deals.
Yeah. But the terms of the deal have changed, right? I mean, the terms of the political reality have changed. And you can imagine the temptation anyway in foreign capitals to look at this and suddenly discover a codicil or a paragraph or a subsection that you really object to. And, we're just not going to be able to sign this thing after all.
Yeah, interesting. Also, just watching some in terms of the market reaction, guys, the dollar index actually initially kind of jumped on it and now has turned lower. And maybe Torsten's Lock, it's because of what you say, which is, well, it'll be easier to get easier policy now if you don't have to worry about tariffs.
Because the expectation is if rates are going to come down, then there's less money, of course, coming into dollars. But at the same time, another key issue here is also that if the government needs to go out and find 133 billion, if we now see more treasury issuance, the curve could potentially also see some reaction. But that's why
Yeah, that wouldn't be a good thing. If we have to sell more bonds to raise money just to return money, that would just be a mess, dude. And those yields would go higher at that point. The steepening of the yield curve would get worse. I mean, that's why the Supreme Court literally said it's going to be a mess. The refund process is likely to be a mess. Well, at least Google's up 4% and Meta's at 660. So at least Google and Meta shareholders are making some money on this. We play this again. Here we go.
But they want to use
you mean steepening?
Absolutely, because then they need to go out and find 133 billion on the curve, and if that happens further out, of course, then we should be a steeper curve.
They'll just use another section from another tariff bill.
Yes, the U.S. government needs Klarna. Buy now, pay our tariff refunds later. That'll pump Klarna. They get 133 billion from the U.S. government to be in BNPL. That's what we need.
But that will take some
Collect
time,
the
obviously,
tariffs.
to begin to implement.
Sure, but I mean, ultimately, the bond market hasn't really, we were watching the bond market carefully. We haven't really seen a big sign that there's all of a sudden worry about the debt or anything like
No,
that.
because on the one hand, inflation is going to be lower, which argues for lower rates. But on the other hand, the economy is now going to be hotter. And the economy is already hot because of the One Big Beautiful Bill. We have AI spending, and those tailwinds will continue to accelerate over the next several quarters.
While we're on that, I've seen conflicting numbers from IRS and B of A on where refunds are tracking. How are we up year on year? And do we think that money's going to get spent on utility bills or saved with the saving rate as low as it is today?
Well, the key issue is that the refunds will, broadly speaking, be roughly $1,000 bigger when we come to tax filing season. Normally, households get $3,000 in tax filing seasons, meaning in March and April. This time around, they will likely get around $4,000. That's a very, very meaningful increase in consumer spending because there's about 120 million households in the U.S. If you give them $1,000 extra more, that is a very meaningful boost in March, April, and May to consumer spending over the coming months. So on the back of this decision, it really is moving more towards a Goldilocks scenario where growth is going to get better and at the same time, inflation is going to be lower.
I still don't understand why you think services inflation comes down as a result of this.
Well, I've been arguing with you for a long time.
I know, but you're expecting all this great growth and GDP
but
growth.
I think last year...
That's what's fueling services
No,
inflation.
you're right. But last year, most of the growth in inflation came from goods. Now that's been coming down a bit, but service inflation, it begins to get hotter. And that's because the labor market is hotter because immigration is now running much lower and therefore creating more wage inflation. So the conclusion is, yes, you're right in total. There's a lot of moving parts, goods and services for inflation, but the net effect of this must be in the Fed's forecast that inflation is going to be lower.
What about productivity improvements, given everything we're talking about in AI that's still mostly on the come, but could start to hit this year?
Yeah, that's true. We haven't seen that yet. As Jay Powell has said repeatedly, we're not seeing it in inflation, we're not seeing it in productivity, we're not seeing it in unemployment. So yes, it is likely that we'll begin to see some of that, but those, of course, are very uncertain factors at this point. But those are also key issues for the inflation forecast if they were to play out.
Not to mention for the job forecast over time as well, as we've discussed many times, in terms of
Absolutely.
the dislocation that may come from AI.
What about consumer spending? Do you think there will actually be a change in consumer spending and confidence as a result of this decision?
Well, if the importers now go out and say, well, suddenly we don't have to pay tariffs at these magnitudes, that should imply that prices of goods that are imported should begin to come down. And that should ultimately mean that retailers should see a boost because demand should be going up for, of course, a lot of things when it comes to consumer goods. So in the goods world, this is absolutely boosting, of course, sales, and at the same time is lowering prices. So this is truly Goldilocks for the goods sector.
I wonder, it's funny, we have some names up here, including consumer electronics. Do you think memory prices are going to be so powerful that they'll be a deterrent on spending?
Well, at this point, of course, that also depends on the AI outlook and of what's happening, of course, on the AI and data center spending front. But you're right, there's a lot of different things when it comes to these tariffs. What the reaction will be in terms of demand will be very critical. But that's what we need to watch, of course, over the next several months.
So you do see real wages growing for the year, because they've compressed a little bit, yes?
Yeah, they have, but average hourly earnings are still very forecasted by the consensus to be very elevated because of, as Sarah is mentioning, service sector inflation is still running relatively hot, and it still takes time for housing is going to come down, but the other components of service sector inflation are still going to be relatively elevated. This is all about goods, and goods makes up roughly a third of the CPI basket, so that's why goods inflation is going to see some downward pressure over.
What a freaking day, folks. I agree with them. Lots of different forms of inflation could take some downward pressure just based on the pure idea of prices coming down. But then again, that's also hedged with the idea of A, prices not coming down as much, but B, people buying more because they might not be as worried about tariffs. Now, again, the free flow of trade, Google, by the way, up 4%. Not sure why Google's up, but big tech's loving it. Google's up, S&P's up, Nvidia's up. Meta's up. The free flow of trade is something that obviously it creates a more vibrant economy. If that can continue to be as strong as it was without any tariff barriers, which again, one could argue the tariffs didn't necessarily stop the free flow trade from being super vibrant. It just created a little bit of a hiccup. Then that's good for the economy. That's good for global manufacturing. That's good for prices. That's good for consumers. That's good for real wages. But the part it's not good for is the increased investment coming into the United States, potentially at the extent at which Trump, he brags about $10 trillion have come in over the past year. A lot of that money was, again, essentially negotiated with the linchpin of tariffs being the deciding factor on if that money would come. I'm sure the Europeans want to invest, but they might not want to invest as much if they didn't have the threat of tariffs looming over them. So there's a lot more questions than answers now over the coming weeks of how the administration handles this. Robinhood up 3%, SoFi trying to get back to 19, Open Door up 11. The Qs are up 1. I mean, the market likes it. Now, then again, big tech goes up one day, goes down the other day. So it's not like this can be any sort of a trend until I think we have at least another week of some of this momentum. Nvidia's next week. That's going to be important. The dollar did go down. It spiked up a little bit. And then I think you had some more fears of inflation, which is why it went down. S&P at 688, Google 4, Nvidia just below 190. Wow, Lucid cuts 12% of staff. I still don't know how Lucid's in business, to be honest, but Lucid cutting 12% of staff, that stock is up about 1% right there. Microsoft not catching a bid? Yeah, Microsoft, huh? Meta and Google, Nvidia getting some love right here. Microsoft not getting any. Amazon obviously getting some love. Tesla getting a little bit. Amazon at 209. All right, folks, that's what we got today. That is what we got. We have been waiting for 4 months. 4 months, almost 5 months, to be honest, for the Supreme Court decision. And we got it. The tariffs are ruled illegal in a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court of the United States of America. 2 out of the 6 justices were handpicked by Trump in 2017, and they have refuted his landmark policy for his second term. Trump has not issued a proper statement on this yet. No Truth Social post, but I think throughout today we'll get some more quotes from him, and then the administration's lawyers will get working on figuring out how they can implement tariffs even without using IEEPA. Oh, that's a good point. Amazon, Google, and Meta have ad businesses. You take out tariffs, there's a lot more money for marketing, a lot more money that people can spend on ads if they don't necessarily have to pay for those tariffs. All right, that's what we got, folks. I am done for today. We got the decision. There it is. Markets are green. Hopefully they hold up. Every Friday we have tended to go at least a bit green. Last Friday we went really green and then we dumped in the last hour. So hopefully we can at least hold on to some of this momentum. But I think there are more questions than answers about tariffs right now, especially on refunds, what section the administration is going to use to try to implement their current tariffs. And then ultimately, what are foreign governments going to do and how are they going to react to the deals they've potentially already negotiated with the United States? That's what we got. That is what we got. Now, I will not be live today for the market close. I'm going to be in New York doing an interview. A podcast. This is just me, not me and Steve. I think you guys will enjoy it. It'll probably be out next week. But unfortunately, the only time that interview could happen was at 3:30. So we are not going to have the market close today. It's with a very high-level C-suite executive. I have to adjust to their schedule. They can't really adjust to mine. I couldn't really be like, I have a market close. Then I probably would have not been able to get the interview. But unfortunately, we're not going to have a market close today. We will be back for the Sunday futures. And it is not Michael Burry. I would love to talk to him, though. One day I wouldn't mind having a conversation. But yeah, we're not going to have the close today. But I mean, this is a pretty momentous day. And quite frankly, nothing on the close could compare to what we just saw, which was a landmark decision. I really didn't think it would be 6-3. I thought it would be 5-4, or I thought we wouldn't get it. But we got it. And the Supreme Court acknowledging, we don't know what you're going to do with the refunds, but we know that it is indeed unconstitutional. We do not have a substitute teacher. Maybe Matt does the market close. Maybe Sam does it. But we're not going to have a substitute teacher here. But we'll be back on Sunday, and we'll see eventually after a couple of days. Also, that looming strike on Iran, I mean, that's going to be something that over the weekend might be something we have to worry about. Trump might be distracted, though, from Iran now. I mean, now he has to get all of his smart lawyers together in a room and figure out over the next 3 months, how do they get these tariffs to be implemented? I mean, maybe foreign policy takes a back seat because, again, this is the thing he ran on, and it just got struck down. A year's worth of work. You know, as a president, you only have 2 years to really do anything. After the midterms, unless he sweeps the midterms, which, I mean, for his case, hopefully he does, but a lot of times it's not easy. 2018, you know, he lost the midterms. Unless you do that, didn't Biden lose in the 2022 midterms as well? The Republicans? Like, it's midterms, you know, this is democracy. It always swings back and forth. Like, you have 2 years to do something, and then you become a lame duck. And he spent the first year negotiating these deals based on tariffs. That entire first year, unless he finds a way to meaningfully implement it, just got struck. That means we went through Liberation Day for no reason, bro. Like, literally, the whole point of Liberation Day was these freaking tariffs. We got some good deals because retail bought the dip. But realistically, we didn't need to go through that. But I guess it was part of the storyline. It was part of the storyline. All right, there we go. That's what we got. Let's get through word of the day. And we'll keep going from there. Again, no market close today, but we will be live for Sunday futures. And we'll see how the street reacts to it. Trump says he has to do something about the courts. Wow, that's from Reuters. Imagine Trump says we got to pack the courts. We gotta get 11 justices. EU Parliament Trade Committee will meet on Monday on the U.S. trade. Wow. The EU Parliament wasting no time. Wasting zero time. EU Parliament issues a statement. The Trade Committee will meet on Monday about the U.S. trade deal. Dude, every country was just ready for this moment. And they are ready to see what they can do to change the negotiations they had last year. The EU has never been so quick. Oh, they're quick to... I mean, look, they had to pay a lot of money on these tariffs. If it's illegal now, they are ready to completely shift. We're getting some commentary from the people in that governor's breakfast. Trump was speaking to a room full of U.S. governors at the White House when he was handed a note from an aide informing him of the Supreme Court decision. A source tells me, I think it's from Axios. Trump was visibly frustrated and told the crowd that he had to do something about the courts, the source said. Wow. Man, that had to be a low blow, getting that freaking note that says 6-3. That had to suck for Trump seeing that. The only relation that I have to getting a note passed by somebody and feeling excited, in this case I was excited, not sad, was when I was on a flight in 2016 coming back from Utah. It was the Cavs and Warriors game 7, and I obviously I wanted to know who won, but the pilot didn't want to tell everybody who won game 7, and the flight attendant passed a napkin to everyone who wanted to know who won the game. And I opened up the napkin and it said 93-89 Cavs win, and I almost started crying because I wanted the Cavs to win so badly. And I was just like, oh my goodness, yeah, LeBron pulled it off. He won the chip. So that's the only time I can relate to getting past the note and then having some emotions. But I would imagine 6-3 on this side was not something Trump wanted to see. Thanks for sharing that stupid story. Okay, anyway. Word of the day. What do we got? Word of the day. Please give me something decent. I don't even want to try this shit, dude. Pusillanimous? Pusillanimous? Showing a lack of courage or determination. Pusillanimous. Bro, there's no way you guys can say this word. There's no way you guys can get mad at me for saying this shit. Also, Trump's not live. If he was live, I would go to him. But Trump is not live. Matt, you're going to have to do the market close, bro. We're going to need you today to do the market close. All right. How do you say this word? How do you say this freaking word?
Pusillanimous.
Yeah. Nobody in the chat knew how to say that. Get out of here. Nobody thought the U was a Y-O-O.
Pusillanimous.
Pusillanimous. Get out of here. I would have absolutely failed in a spelling bee if I had to do one. I would have been like, what? I'm like, can you say it again? Can you say it clearly? Can you spell it out, bro? You know, they say, can you say it again? Can you use it in a sentence? I'd be like, can you spell it out in a way that it can be said so that I can have a chance of saying this?
Pusillanimous.
Pusillanimous, dude. All right, that's what we got. That's what we got. Selling at the first sign of volatility can be a bit pusillanimous, especially if your thesis hasn't changed. Pusillanimous. Dude, none of you guys thought it was a P-Y-O-O. Everyone said puss, just like me. Okay? Everyone, I thought it was pusillanimous. It was pusillanimous. It is what it is. Like, I doubt anyone knew what this word meant. Regardless, it looks like Trump is going to have to figure out how to navigate these tariffs because this thing is ugly. Tesla's dumping. Spy's dumping. Meta's dumping. Okay, I'm being dramatic, but like you're seeing red candles. Again, this market, it goes up, it goes down, and it just does not hold on. I would not be surprised if we go flat for the day. S&P 687. Look at that. Lost 689. If that red candle keeps going, we're headed to 685. Microsoft getting hit worse. Meta losing 660. The Q's losing 610. Market hates uncertainty. That's why I was surprised the markets actually went up, to be honest. Like, again, Nike and Elf going up, but Nike didn't even hold it. Yeah, Nike's red now. Like, markets hate uncertainty more than they hate tariffs. And so it's kind of surprising when it jumped immediately. All right, folks, that's it. I will be back on Sunday. Again, no market close today. Hopefully, Matt can go live for people. I will link his channel in the chat, and maybe he can do the market close. But yeah, I think it'll be a good interview. It should be out next week. I think you guys will enjoy it. I kind of have to adjust to that person's schedule. And yeah, the tariffs are out. The tariffs are officially out, and we got a conclusion to this essentially year-long saga of the tariffs. And now it's over. It's kind of crazy, dude. 6-3. Wow. 6-3 is what we got. Is Steve live, you guys? Why are you guys saying Steve is live? Steve is not live. Yeah, Steve's not live. He's at the office today. I know because I'm probably going to see him in New York today. So there's no way he's live. But maybe he calls into Matt's show and does the market close. Matt, we need you today. We need you to do the close. All right, so that is it. It's not the Ondas guy. It is a company that you guys do love. I will say that. It's a company I like as well, but it's not the Ondas guy. Hopefully we can still get him on the stream. Oh, yes, Michelle. Thank you for Michelle, if you didn't remind me that. Michelle got a gift for Steve. I have to give it to him. It came in late. Okay. Thank you for saying that. Now, literally, I forgot I even had that thing in my house, Michelle. I'm not gonna lie. So I will give that to Steve today. So there you go. Okay, I was about to leave, but we got another headline. British Chambers of Commerce trade body court's decision raises question on how the U.S. importers can reclaim levies already paid. Yeah, this thing is not slowing down, man. This thing is going to be months, if not a year-long saga on how people get paid their money back. There it is. Supreme Court decision. Got it done. Hopefully markets are relatively tame. We got some red candles right here. And I'll be back on Sunday to see how we get ready. Next week is NVIDIA. So that's a big one. By the way, next Thursday, I think is going to be even crazier than next Wednesday. So Wednesday, we have NVIDIA, Salesforce, and Snowflake. So that'll be massive in one day. Thursday, We have Rocket Lab, which everyone here loves. We have CoreWeave, big one, SMR, Nuclear, Dell, Semi, SoundHound, AI, Duolingo. People are thinking, has this bottomed or is this going to collapse? Intuit, SaaS sell-off, Square, FinTech, MP, Rare Earths, UUU, more Nuclear. You have Monster, the best performing stock of all time, TeraWolf, AI, HPC, Zscaler, Rocket Mortgages. I mean, you got a lot of stuff on Thursday. So Wednesday and Thursday next week are going to be crazy. And then obviously Wednesday we have NVIDIA, Salesforce, Snowflake, but NVIDIA is going to be the big one. Yes, D-Wave also on Thursday. So next week's going to be massive. And, I guess we're going to see if the tariff stuff has an impact or if earnings can determine the route that this market goes. All right, folks. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining every single day this week. I know it was a shortened week. We'll be back on Sunday. Again, deeply, deeply appreciate everyone joining every morning and afternoon. LA meetup again is happening on March 28th. I will talk more about it next week. Singapore likely happening in June. So we will have details on Singapore probably next week. I'm having a meeting about it this weekend. But for those that want to show up to the LA meetup, March 28th in Culver City, link right there in the chat. Our boy Matt Money will be there. Steve will be there. A bunch of people will be there. And I hope to see people there as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one. Have a great weekend. I will see you guys Sunday for the Future Show. And we will keep going from there. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.